All right. So, I guess to get it kicked off here, we just had an AMA or a debate the other day. Are you familiar with Dr. Warren Farrell?
No, I'm not. Should I be?
Uh, Not really. I guess he was one of the guys in the Red Pill movie.
Oh, nice. Okay. Is that the one with
Um,
the woman made that converted her to believing in red pill bullshit or whatever?
yeah,
Okay.
Red Pill bullshit. Yeah. So I'm kind of curious. What are your thoughts, broadly speaking, on feminism and the men's rights movement?
The men's rights movement, if you're intelligent, is actually almost entirely subsumed by most reasonable feminists. Men's rights movements accurately point out that there are problems and struggles that men have in society, but most reasonable feminists should also recognize these problems as well. It's part of like patriarchy theory. So, for instance, when men's rights movements complain about things like men die doing hard work or shitty jobs or are the victims of most murders, a reasonable feminist should say, oh, yeah, of course, that's because there are unfair emotional burdens that are placed on men as well as a result of like the expectations for how men should act or ought to act in society. That like patriarchy or feminism should deal with both the ways that men and women suffer under that system, is how it's supposed to be. Obviously, some more radical feminists might not acknowledge that, but I mean, like, generally, that's supposed to be the case.
Okay, sounds fair. I'm also curious. Have you, yeah, I feel like this is a little bit of a dumb question because we just covered half this, but during coronavirus, what are the main games you've been playing? Is there any? I know there's a lot of new things coming out right now. Is there anything that's really stuck out for you?
Um, I mean, I started playing Final Fantasy VII. I haven't finished it yet. I'm still okay with it. It seems to be fun so far. I've actually had a really good experience with it. But I haven't gotten super far into it. We're just about to go into the Shinra HQ, so I might change my opinion on it. But other than that, it's just like League and other random games. Oh, I played Doom. That was really fucking cool. I really like that game, but yeah.
Um, have you tried Bannerlord yet?
Hmm. I played a lot of a game called Kenshi. I wanted to try Bannerlord a bit. I just didn't get into it early on. Maybe if I play it again later, we'll see.
Let's see here. Laura wants to know, do you think that the corona outbreak is making the idea of UBI mainstream?
UBI, I don't think so, but I mean, maybe more so than it was before. I mean, I'm sure there'll be a lot more people talking about like what is the government's responsibility for taking care of its citizens, especially during these types of things. But
All right. I am not sure what this is in reference to, but Mr. Me wants to know, in light of your recent Twitter interaction, how much influence do you think content creators have on their audience, and specifically in the context of voting?
um, I think quite a bit. I think that as content creators, I think that all of your people eventually become like mini yous, or they parrot a lot of your opinions and your ideas. So I think you're relatively influential. Yeah. I wish there was like a survey or way to track it. That'd be interesting.
Isn't that more of just the people gravitating towards content creators that they already agree with?
Possibly. Like a form of self-selection. Maybe people don't
Yeah.
actually change their opinions at all. Maybe they just sort themselves into content creators that happen to think a certain way. I'm not sure. I mean, I've seen my community's opinions change quite a bit in line with my communities, or I'm sorry, in line with my viewpoints. So in that sense, it feels like I've moved my community a bit on certain issues, but maybe that's just new people coming in and old people going out. It's hard to say.
Um, KR Cartographer wants to know, who do you think is the best running mate for Biden?
Hmm. I don't really know enough about that to say. I've heard different names floated, but it's probably going to be like a strategic pick to secure a state or something, or maybe that one, the lady that gave the DNC response to Trump's State of the Union. I've heard her name floated a few times, but I haven't like looked into it a lot to know like who the best pick would be or who they're like seriously floating. I'm not sure.
And I can't remember. There's a phrase for this, but that's what it is. Are you vote blue no matter who?
Almost, yeah. I mean, generally, it would have to be a tremendously, unbelievably horrible candidate for me to not want to vote.
Um, uh, The boyfriend wants to know: are people who donate to Bernie before and publicly advocate that others vote for Biden morally obligated to donate for Biden?
Not necessarily. You don't have to donate for anybody. They might not have money to do it in the future, or they might not feel as motivated to donate to Biden as they did to Bernie. It's okay.
Kaiser Wilhelm wants to know: what are your thoughts on NAFTA? He says he knows you're a fan of free trade, but has heard specific criticisms of the provisions of the deal and the chilling effect it had on the Mexican economy.
My understanding is that both economies and the average consumer in both economies benefited quite a bit, with some targeted gains and some targeted losses. The big criticisms of NAFTA seems to be that the people that lose out on trade deals like that aren't usually adequately compensated. So while the entire economy might make slight gains in either productivity or in like consumer savings, the people that are impacted negatively by it suffer heavy individual losses, and that's kind of a problem that we don't talk about enough with large trade deals.
Tripod wants to know: do you think the Nazis could have succeeded in defeating the Soviets without changing any fundamentals of the war?
Could the Nazis have defeated the Soviets without changing any of the fundamentals of the war? I don't know if the Nazis would have ever won against the Soviets with the rest of the world kind of backing the Soviets up. It seems to be highly unlikely that that would ever happen. Especially like the United States, like once Lend-Lease started and once other countries started to ship supplies and stuff to Russia, to the Soviet Union, it seemed pretty unlikely that Germany was ever going to win on that front.
Yeah. All right. Jules Myvern wants to know: do you think the freedom of the press should have limits?
Yeah, that's a really weird question. I mean, everything should have limits. I'm trying to understand what they're asking about. Like, obviously, you shouldn't be allowed to murder people to uncover truths or whatever. I mean, I wish I knew what they meant by what kind of limits. Like, should you be able to report on national security secrets that could damage the United States? I mean, maybe not. I'm not sure. I guess it would depend on the secret. I would need a little bit more information, I guess, to answer that question accurately.
All right. Well, I guess, are there any things that you think we should change currently in what we protect with free speech?
On a federal level, probably not. I wish like corporations or institutions would crack down harder on misinformation and people that like are malicious or grossly uninformed when they talk about certain things. Although companies have started to do that a bit, but.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that should be required by law, or just some companies?
No, like I said, on like the federal legislative level, I guess probably not. I just wish companies would take a more active approach.
All right. Balrog asks, you've mentioned in an AMA previously that you believe if God were to exist with his various omni properties, he would be able to dictate objective morality. Can you elaborate on the meta ethics of this position?
I mean, it would seem to me this is almost like tautological, like by definition, that if we define God as being an entity that knows everything, and if morality is knowable, if there are moral facts, that God would come out of existence and he would tell us what those moral facts are. So, I mean, it seems like by definition, God being God, if he were to tell us what morality is, it would be true because he knows everything, right? That would be my assumption.
All right. So we're on to the next question. Just heads up, everyone. If you don't know yet, I think most of you guys already do. We're talking here with Destiny. You can write your questions in Destiny questions above this voice chat. Discuss in Destiny discussion. And if you want to invite your friends, it's just discord.gg/bluepolitics. Kaio wants to know, what are your ideas regarding an anarchist society, independent of whether you think it'll be feasible to achieve within our lifetimes?
I don't really have any ideas about stuff like that. I don't know. It's not. I don't think about stuff like that much. I guess it would be interesting, but I don't know. It's not the world that I live in, I guess.
Okay. Bait wants to know, do you think it's morally acceptable to treat animals as property?
Yeah, I think we already do.
Ark wants to know, do you think that, generally speaking, your take on autism has evolved since you last made videos on it? What is your take on autism is not a disorder?
I don't know. It's a really hard one. I'm not sure. I kind of go back and forth on it. I don't really know. I don't have a strong opinion now. What that guy's probably specifically referring to is the fact that I viewed autism as being kind of like strictly negative. Like if you could be born without autism, it'd probably be better to be born without autism or autism spectrum disorder. I still kind of sort of feel that way. I can kind of see arguments in the other way, but I don't know. It still seems to me to be like kind of like a bad thing. It'd be better to not have rather than to have it. But
All right, and Bader Hassan wants to know, when arguing with someone, what areas do you focus on the most?
usually just logic. So like typically, like if I'm having an argument with somebody, usually what I'm trying to figure out is like, what is your worldview? Like, how do you put together your thoughts? You know, why do you consider a certain thing good or bad? And then I try to plug other things into that to be like, okay, well, you think that this is bad for this reason. What if I give you this action? Would you still apply the same rationale to it and say that it's bad? Or does it change for some reason? So like maybe we're comparing like
WEEW.
somebody says like Obama. Oh, so I argued with a conservative recently that said that Obama's really bad because of stuff he did, like bombing Syria. And then I say, oh, okay, so you say that Obama is bad because he bombed Syria. And then I'll ask, okay, well, why, or do you think that Trump was bad when he bombed Syria, right? I'm curious if you find like, if you apply like the same rationale there. Most of my debates or conversations are usually just like running through like very simple kind of like logical syllogisms, I guess, like that to find out if a person's opinion is consistent. And then they usually get mad and say I'm trying to trap them in debate tricks or whatever when we go through those questions.
All right. Kozar wants to know, what were your main problems with Bernie as a candidate, and why did you prefer other candidates during the primary?
So I disagreed economically with most of Bernie's positions. So like, I don't think nationwide rent control is a good idea. I'm pretty on the wall about like a federal jobs guarantee. I don't think that like Medicare for all, the way that he wanted to implement it, was like a politically feasible idea, or maybe even the best way to do healthcare. And I'm not a big fan of like protectionist trade or immigration policy, which I think are both things he's in favor of as well. Real quick, somebody in chat said, do you think having animals as property is ethical? Yeah, we're already doing that. Like what? That's not even an answer to the question. Sorry, what I meant to say was, yes, I do think it's ethical, and we already do that. Obviously, I'm not using the fact that we do it as a justification for doing it. But yeah, I mean, I don't yield any moral consideration to animals. So if you want to have them as property or whatever, I think that's fine. Like we eat them, it's whatever. If you're a vegan, you can't really make any, unless you're a vegan, you can't really make any arguments against not having animals as property because you already eat animals. I mean, we could do like a whole conversation on veganism if we want, but that was my answer to that. Sorry, okay, go ahead.
So I actually have a question. I noticed earlier today that you were pretty close to, sorry, math is weird here. What was the number? It wasn't a million. It was, 100 million total views. You got any special plans for when you reach?
Oh my God.
You gotta do something naughty?
When I
cocaine?
Crazy? I don't know. I don't have any plans right now. It's just a number to me. But maybe I will. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. So Costes wants to know, do you think women tend to lean left from their birth?
That's like an impossible question to answer. I have no idea. It's possible that there are differences between men and women that would cause women to lean maybe further left than right, given a totally equal environment. But the environment for men and women are significantly different. The environments are significantly different, so it's hard to say how much an environment influences one person to choose a particular thing versus some innate biology thing.
All right. Ito wants to know, what are your thoughts on the nationalization of nuclear power in an effort to create a more sustainable and widely accessible energy?
I don't know enough about the financing related to nuclear power. My current understanding is that nuclear power just isn't really possible right now because the insurance you would need to cover any nuclear reactor is more expensive than it doesn't offset the cost of production or whatever for nuclear power. Mm-hmm. So that makes it seem like it would need to be nationalized, but I'm not 100. There might be other information that I just don't know about that.
Mm-hmm. Friends wants to know if you have any thoughts about the historical evidence for Jesus and his followers.
Not much. I don't have any thoughts on
that. I really enjoy this one. Maximus wants to know, if you were to debate Ben Shapiro, who would talk faster?
I don't know. It probably would depend on which one of us got more upset.
let's see here. Balrog wants to know, at what level of cognition do you begin granting rights to an individual? And this question, he says, is mostly tied with abortion.
Yeah, I don't know the right answer to that. It would probably be somewhere when they start to develop some sort of conscious experience, and I don't know exactly when that is. So.
All right. Chargebug wants to know, what are your thoughts on Sweden's the coronavirus?
It seemed like their numbers were a bit worse than other Scandinavian countries, so it seems like they're not doing a great job with what they were trying to do, but we'll know more, I guess, once we're through everything. It's hard to say.
And I'll ask, what are your thoughts on Trump's handling of the
Nerds.
coronavirus? What are your thoughts? Oh, it seems to me so far that he's done a pretty atrocious job of handling it. It's pretty. I think America right now is in a pretty embarrassing spot in the world that we're losing so hard to a fucking virus. It's pretty sad.
Not Alex Jones wants to know, what are your thoughts on Biden's voting record on the Iraq War? Given the intel at the time, is it fair to be critical of those who voted for it?
Yeah, I think it's fair to be critical. Yeah, I think it was a pretty shitty vote. I don't think voting for the Iraq War was a good vote at
all. Kaiser Wilhelm wants to know, what are your thoughts on carbon taxes as a form of environmental legislation?
I mean, theoretically, carbon taxes sound like a good idea to me. I guess at the end of the day, it would depend on their implementation. But yeah, I mean, it seems like a good idea to me. Yeah.
Christ, some of these. You know what? This isn't that bad. I'll throw this one in there. USOWE wants to know, what do you say to detractors who point out that your personal hygiene, us poor, and you aren't even on time? No, I'm sorry, man. This is just fucking.
We might as well finish it, I guess.
I was half just making fun of the guy who was asking it. Let's see. Tripod has a question he'd like to ask. Tripod, are you there?
Yep. Hey.
All right, go ahead, man.
Hey, Destiny. So, with stuff like kind of a lot of fake news or whatever you want to call it, and the state of kind of a lot of political commentators putting out what you would agree was pretty crappy discourse and like a lot of lies, misinformation, and mischaracterizations of the truth and stuff. Would you say that the health of American democracy is possibly quite a permanent threat from this? Like that possibly America could be at some kind of turning point, and that maybe American democracy could be an ultimate threat into the future.
You mean just in terms of like allowing like disingenuous newscasters or pundits to? Like...
Yeah, so stuff like that. That perhaps that could lead to a dissolving of American democracy as a whole.
I mean, I think that's always been a threat or a problem. I don't see it dissolving our democracy anytime soon. It just weakens our ability to get effective stuff like legislation passed or effective problems or dealing with the problems in an effective manner because nobody knows what they should do because people are working with different information sets.
Do you think perhaps it's like greater threat than before, perhaps with internet?
I think it is, yeah. I think that with the
yeah,
internet, the ability to deliver false news to people and get paid for it, and to hyper-target people that need fake news so that you can make more money off of them, I think is a bigger threat than it was in the past, yeah.
Okay, cool. That's, yeah.
All right. Sergeant Jellybellies would like to know if you have ever tried getting a debate with an Austrian economist.
Nope.
Would you have any interest in something like that?
I mean, it would depend on the topic and the person, yeah, I guess.
Okay. Okay. Kingy wants to know, what do you think of Starship Troopers? Either the book or the movie.
Honest to God, I watched that shit so long ago. I don't remember enough. I think when I was young, this is a pretty old movie, right? Yeah, 97. I think when I watched it, I just saw it as like a action movie. I didn't see deeper into that at all because I was just a kid when I watched it, so I haven't seen it in a long, long time.
All right. Chargerbug wants to know, how can we get rid of the two-party system? And of course, do you think we should?
In terms of how to get rid of it, it feels like we need to change the voting that we do. Like the first past the post is probably not the best way to encourage healthy competition. But other than that, I mean, I don't know, like third-party candidates winning elections in smaller districts for things like Congress seats would probably be important, or Senate seats, like House or Senate seats. But I mean, otherwise, I mean, I imagine they must try to do that. So I don't know what would have to change fundamentally in America to get third parties more out there. It seems like changing like the voting system would be a big step in the direction.
Let's see here. Yeah, I'm gonna go with this. Steglapur wants to know, what are your views on communism?
I think it's stupid. I don't think about it much. It's like the anarchy question.
All right. So when talking to, I guess, fairly white bread conservatives, or people making conservative talking points, like, Candace, people parroting stuff from types like Candace Owens, Charlie Kirk, PragerU, etc. What do you think is the best way to address them?
I mean, it super depends on the person making the arguments and why they're making those arguments. Like, some people are genuinely racist and hateful. Most people aren't. Most people are probably just a little misinformed about some facts, or are motivated to reason their way to a certain position because of either family members or community members or something else. Like, I mean, it really depends. Yeah, it really depends. It's more important for why the person got to their conclusion rather than what the conclusion is, to determine how you should sway the person out of said conclusion.
What are your thoughts on gamers complaining about representation in games as far as gender, historical stuff, etc.?
What do I think about gamers do it? What? Say that again?
Representation in video games. So, for example, when people complain, I think in Battlefield 5 you could play as a black Nazi.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't care. I don't think there's anything wrong with representation of video games. I mean, like, you can make a video game however you want, regardless of what some people say. Nobody plays video games for historical accuracy. It's just not true. So I mean, like, if you can throw different types of people into video games to make other people interested in them, for me, it's strictly a positive, because it means more potential audiences for when I play games. So I don't really care. If people want to do it, go for it. As long as the stories and the characters are written well, it's fine.
All right. How much? Bane wants to know, how much of an existential threat do you consider AI to be?
At the moment, I don't really think about it at all. I think if we were looking for huge, looming existential threats to mankind, I'd be far more concerned with things like climate change, or even like nuclear war or something, before AI.
Okay. KR Cartographer wants to know, would you support mandatory voting like in other countries, Australia?
I'd have to think about that a lot. Like, as much as you have a right to vote, I don't know if you should have a force to vote. Maybe you have a right not to vote as well if you don't want to. So, I mean, I don't know. Like, on an emotional level, like, I have a feeling against forcing people to vote. But maybe empirically, maybe forcing people to vote causes them to take a greater interest in politics and results in an overall better net good. I'm not sure. I don't have strong feelings on that.
So user Wax says that they recently saw a debate between Destiny, Sargon, Hasan, Asmongold, and Nick, and that Nick and Sargon held many disagreeing views towards Destiny, and he wants to know, what do you think you could have better to make your perspective seem more reasonable to the opposing side?
I think having Hasan on my side in that conversation hurt me a lot, because I kind of got roped into defending like socialist or communist ideas at some points, which like hurt me a lot in that conversation. I think not having to worry about that would have been really good.
All right. User iFun wants to know, is there a way for U.S. politics to move forward in a positive way, and what form of action is instrumental to that social progress?
Is it possible for it to move in a positive? I mean, I'd consider like getting a Democrat in office right now to be positive over Trump. So I mean, voting would obviously help that. But I mean, I don't know. That's a pretty broad question. I mean, we can improve in a lot of different ways. Our healthcare system could improve. Our immigration policy could improve. The war on drugs could be gone. I mean, our foreign policy could improve. I mean, any number of these things could improve. They're just, I don't think American people care about most of these political topics, or they care about like one or two. So there's not a lot of push to move in positive directions on a lot of them. But I mean, I guess we'll see after this election cycle what people care about the most.
With a lot of stuff going on in games, such as everything seems to be, what is it called, battle royale, the Fortnite style.
Yeah, that's the current popular game mode. Yeah.
Do you feel like a lot of games are becoming stale with so many copying each other?
I mean, when it comes to like multiplayer competitive games, that's just how it's kind of been. For a while, RTS was really popular, and then MOBAs became really popular. Now we're moving into like battle royale popularity, and I'm sure there'll be another game mode that comes after. But there's still like a huge plethora of, or there's still a plethora of like like multiplayer competitive games, right? Like a lot of single player games are being made and whatnot, so, or other types of multiplayer games that just aren't like hugely widespread competitive.
Should we have, Kingy wants to know if if service should guarantee citizenship. So like if we have people do public service such as serving the military, should they get fast tracked for citizenship?
I think my understanding is that we should. That was one of the big things about like Abraham Lincoln and then having black people serving in the military, was that like once people start to do that, you kind of have to let them become citizens, or you kind of have to fast track them there. That if you're going to have people like serving in the military, like on behalf of the nation, they probably need to like be like a member of that nation as well. So fast track to citizenship or something is probably worthwhile, I think. Yeah.
Okay. True Neutral wants to know, do you think companies changing games for the West is censorship?
Do you think companies changing games for the West is censorship?
Yeah, I assume it means like, changing games to make it more palatable towards a Western audience.
Like what? What is that? Like, what do you mean?
I don't fucking know.
I mean, it depends on what is being changed and who's making them change it. Like, if they're changing it because they think they can make more money, I mean, I don't think that's necessarily censorship. If they're changing it because the government's telling them to, that's kind of like censorship. Like, I know, for instance, like in Germany, I think all drug references used to be banned in games. I don't know if it still is, or Nazi references. So they would change that to other things, so they'd be more, so that the government wouldn't ban the games. I guess that's a form of censorship, sure.
Is mobile video gaming the bane of humanity?
I mean, I think they're really shit, but I mean, people like it, so I don't know. Personally, like, I think mobile games are pretty bad. I think that they capitalize on a lot of like, on a lot of bad, do I say intuitions or bad instincts that people have related to gambling. Like, they work on those drives quite a bit, which is probably pretty bad. A lot of mobile games seem to really harp on a lot of those gambling strategies. Pay a little bit, get a lot, and you need to pay. You can play for free up to some point until you get hooked, and then they force you to pay. So there might be better mobile games out there that I'm just not aware of, but it feels like a lot of mobile games follow like a similar pattern of kind of like predatory behavior to goad people into paying money for dumb shit inside the game.
Ito wants to know, what are your biggest problems with the online leftist advocacy at the moment?
The Bernie or Busters. A lot of the online advocates seem to come from a certain type of person that is like exclusively caring about like optics or aesthetics, or pushing just like a certain political ideology. And at the end of the day, they don't care as much about outcome of elections as if their guy didn't win, the guy that they like the most didn't get in, which seems to be a pretty privileged take to me.
Are there any controversial issues which you agree with Trump on?
I'm sure. I mean, there's probably something. I'm sure, but I don't know. I don't know any off the top of my head.
Okay. I'm sorry. What is your position on the trade wars?
I think trade wars are usually dumb. They're usually done with political purposes in mind, not economic ones, and they very rarely like get the results that politicians think they're going to get.
LMAO wants to know, what are your thoughts on Vaush?
I mean, he seems to do a good job at like being like a dirtbag leftist or whatever that group of people is called. I feel like he is pretty strict on his argumentation. He's a little bit more rigorous than a lot of the other lefties online. So, I mean, I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. Kaiser Wilhelm wants to know your thoughts on the Venezuela sanctions, the one starting in 2017 under Trump.
I don't think I have particular thoughts on them. I don't know what kind of thoughts, like whether or not they're going to be effective at pressuring like political change, or I mean in general, like I'm not usually a fan of, like I'm more in favor of like using other I mean like sanctions are a form of soft political power, right, or soft political pressure that we use to like bring countries to kneel, or bring countries to negotiating tables on certain issues, or we use it to punish countries for certain things. So I haven't followed up on the impacts of like the sanctions we've done on Venezuela. I don't know like how those are impacting the country. I don't even know exactly what or specifically what was sanctioned. So
Umgo wants to know, how did you build your moral framework?
I don't know. I just start with a pretty baseline thought, and then I just try to like extrapolate positions out from there. So like my pretty baseline thought is I generally want the world to be as good for me as possible. Usually that means that you have to be taking care of your neighbors because you want them to be invested in your outcome. So you have to be invested in their outcome. And then I kind of just extrapolate that out to like a larger framework. And then all of my policy positions come from there.
All right. Just as a note to everyone writing these questions, please do read your question before you send it. It's frustrating for us when you've got something jarbled, but also if you've been on the server for a while, gotten to you and can trust you, and you want to ask the question yourself, right? VC beginning of the question. Let's see here. LMAO wants to know what's wrong with communism.
I just, it's like a fantastical political theory that seems whatever. There's like most people that are communist, first of all, every single communist has a different idea of what communism even means. 99% of the tenets of communism online, like the people that support it, 90% of the people that like support communism online have never read like a paragraph of theory in their entire lives. Most people have no understanding. Like communism is supposed to be like a critique of capitalism, and most of them don't even understand capitalism enough to critique it. Most of the people, when it comes to talking policies or like on the ground decisions, are utterly clueless about like the current day state of political affairs. There's just like the problem with communism. I mean, like as a critique of capitalism, it's interesting, but most of the modern day followers are largely uninformed about either communism or capitalism, and the people supporting it often don't understand like modern day issues that they try to like apply it to. And it's basically just like a big club where everybody gets together and they circle jerk without having any idea what the fuck they're talking about.
Do you have a favorite sport or physical activity to play?
Not really. I'm a video gamer, dude.
Let's see. Tripod has another question here. You there, Tripod?
Yep. Hey.
Go ahead.
Okay. So it's like two sides to this. I guess I'll start with the second part, actually. Do you think that with coming events, do you think China and the United States might enter kind of a new Cold War-esque conflict in the coming years?
Not like the Cold War was before, but some sort of economic Cold War? I mean, maybe. I'm not sure. I don't know if the United States has the forward thought or vision to even engage in that type of warfare. It seems like we're too much a slave to our democratic whims that can point us into a lot of different directions and kind of change with the wind, whereas China is able to be far more focused on long-term goals, and because of their authoritarian nature, they can dedicate a lot of resources towards being focused on it without having to worry about internal political pressure, assuming there's not like a revolution or something.
Okay, that very well leads into my other question of, do you think, therefore, China could possibly overtake the United States in kind of world hegemony because of that ability to focus?
I think so, but it's gonna, like, right now the United States has it depends on how much we damage our relationships with other Western countries, I guess. If the United States continues to allow relationships with other countries to deteriorate, then at some point people might look to China more to lead the world than the US. But right now that doesn't seem like it's happening, at least on like a foreign policy, foreign relations level. But maybe that'll change in the future, I'm not sure. Or maybe as other countries become more relevant on the world stage, like countries in South America and countries in Africa, maybe if they gain more political power and China has closer relationships with them than the United States, then maybe other European countries start to switch over as well. It's hard to say.
Do you think Trump is exacerbating that potential of
Yeah, of
souring
course.
of those
Trump has made the
relations.
United
Yeah.
States appear incredibly unreliable on the world stage, pulling us out of the Iran deal, starting fights with all of our with Canada, and like with Australia. Angela Merkel came out and literally said like maybe it's time to stop relying on the U.S. Pulling funding from the WHO, constantly attacking large institutions that the United States has historically relied on, like NATO. All like bodes pretty poorly, I think, for future U.S. diplomatic relations with these countries, but.
Okay, cool.
All right. Mateo wants to know, based on your experience with them and from what you've researched, what is the most effective strategy to combating white nationalists / neo-Nazis on and offline to stop them from gaining any substantial political power?
I mean, as sad as it is to say, the deplatforming thing seems to work quite a bit. When people get banned off of enough platforms or when enough people refuse to work with them, it seems to destroy their ability to get anything done. I mean, Fuentes' reach has probably been pretty diminished after I think he got a big YouTube ban, right? And then he got kicked off of TikTok after 3 days. Milo Yiannopoulos basically completely evaporated once he lost his book deal over the pedophile stuff. Yeah.
All right. Bob wants to know, do you play the Smash Bros. Series? If so, have you tried out Project Plus?
Nope and nope.
All right. Oh, this is interesting. Umko wants to know why your Twitch and YouTube channel covers both politics and gaming. Why don't you split them into separate channels?
I think usually splitting your viewer base isn't healthy, unless though that's for like really, really big YouTubers. If I got to the point where I had like millions of subs on YouTube, I might consider splitting it. But at this point, I don't know if I would consider doing that.
FWDSLSH says that in a past debate, your views on incestuous relations were brought up as a method to harm your credibility.
Wait, hold on. I'm sorry. It cut off a little bit. Can you say that again?
Yeah.
Having my own.
In a past debate, your views on incestuous relations were brought up as a method to harm your credibility while conflating consensual incestuous relations with inbreeding.
Yeah.
I'm curious, this is the user speaking, of course,
Mm-hmm.
Why you didn't immediately make it clear that you were against inbreeding? Was it simply baiting them into making the two topics the same to make it clear that they were idiots, or did you have some other reason for being passive about it?
I mean, it depends on. I don't know. It depends on the arguments. This is a really hard topic to talk about because most people are super emotionally loaded against it and they don't really think about it at all. So the weird thing is that like if you say that you're against inbreeding, right, and you ask somebody why they're against inbreeding, you're technically making a eugenics argument, which I guess isn't necessarily horrible, but like to say like, oh well, I'm opposed to inbreeding because it might produce genetic defects in a child or has a higher than average chance of producing genetic defects in a child. I mean, technically that means that you should. To be consistent logically, you should also be opposed to all sorts of other types of genetically disabled people breeding as well. So, for instance, like people with Alzheimer's disease or schizophrenia or a whole bunch of mental diseases are more likely to pass that on to children. Or people with certain genetic diseases like Down syndrome shouldn't be allowed to have children. Or people with genetic diseases that make them more predisposed to pass on things like Huntington's. Or like that's just a really weird road to go down to say that like I'm against a certain type of child being conceived because there might be a higher chance that they have some sort of genetic defect. It seems like an easy ride from that to like a eugenics argument, or it is a eugenics argument. That seems to be.
All right, fair enough. DPico wants to know, why do you ignore leftist policy suggestions and say that they have no policy solutions?
Leftists typically have no policy suggestions, and very few have any real solutions to any problems that aren't fantastical. And I've talked to a lot of fairly educated lefties, like Ben Burgess and shit included. Very rarely do they have realistic policy proposals. Usually they admit that any policy proposal they had would be defeated because everybody else is a capitalist, and the only way it would work is like on the back of a global socialist revolution. So the conversation topics with them are pretty meaningless.
I'm not sure what this really means here, but Lumax writes, as a response to your review on incest, how do you differentiate between your slippery slope of normalizing it and a slippery slope fallacy?
I mean, well, so slippery slope becomes a fallacy when you can't draw a point from A to B. So, for instance, if I say, well, if humans start having gay sex, next we're going to allow bestiality, right? That would be considered a slippery slope fallacy because just because we allow gay people to get married, nobody's arguing that that's going to mean that we need to have animals getting married to people next. Like, there is no connection from A to B. Whereas if you have a child, say like, hey, can you let me stay up 5 minutes past my bedtime? If you do that 2 or 3 or 4 nights in a row, eventually they might get to like midnight or something that's like way past what their potential should be. That's like a reasonable slippery slope. Like you can see how you can draw the line from getting to A to B to C to D. When it comes to like you shouldn't have incestuous relationships because it might normalize it in harmful cases, I don't know if that's necessarily like a good argument or not. I mean, like it's generally not a very interesting topic because like the vast majority of incestuous cases would be immoral because of other reasons present, like massive power differentials as well. So for instance, like a child and a parent can never have like a truly consensual sexual relationship because like the parent is always going to be in a massive position over the child, whether it's by age or whether it's by financial status, like the fact that they provide housing. Siblings are oftentimes never going to be able to engage in like healthy incestuous relationships because there's usually going to be like an older sibling or people are going to have pressure at school. It's just, yeah, like generally incestuous relationships are always going to be immoral for reasons regardless of the fact that they're incestuous.
All right. KR Cartographer says Andrew Cuomo got strangely popular in the wake of the virus, decimating a state. If he endorses AOC's strongest opponent right before the primary, do you think she could get knocked out? What would the implications of that be?
I have no idea. I'm not sure. It would be interesting if it happened. I don't know how AOC polls in her district. My understanding is that she's one of the most popular politicians in the world right now, at least on social media. The idea that an endorsement for somebody like Cuomo would like cause her to get ousted, I don't know. I don't follow the polling in her district at all, so I'm not sure.
All right. Umgo wants to know, in many of your debates, you already have good insult-based humor and good ability to make your opponent butt of the joke. Do you think of this as somewhat of a debate tactic?
Not really. If I'm starting to get into like insulting my opponent and shit, usually it's because they've already started as well, and there's not really going to be much good debate after. So usually I'm just trying to get a laugh out of making the person upset or frustrated because we've kind of moved past the debate and they just want to like shit fling, and I like doing that. So.
So I'm sure this has been covered, but well, I mean, ad nauseum, you've probably heard this before.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on gay marriage? Were you always, I assume you're in favor, and were you always in favor of it, or did you?
I probably was against it when I was like a kid. I know that growing up until I was like 14, I was like hugely conservative. I came from a very conservative household, so I mean, I was probably against it then. But I mean, for the last like 10, 15 years of my life, like I'm pretty sure I've been okay with it.
What are your thoughts on third parties? Are there any of them that are worth paying attention to?
I don't really follow third parties enough to know or recommend any, so I can't really say. Not in the United States.
What are the main problems you see today with the Democratic Party?
What like problems, like things that I don't personally agree with policy wise, or problems in terms of like effectiveness in like messaging or getting legislation passed?
Policy wise.
Policy wise, it's hard to say even what mainstream like Democratic policy is, I guess. Well, I guess that's not necessarily true. The thing is that like you've got like there are things that the Democratic Party would want to do, and then there are things that the Democratic Party is able to do because they have the political capital for it. In terms of like what the main like Democratic Party positions are, I imagine we're probably in line with most things. Like one major thing I'd be opposed to is like I think that gun control is handled very, very, very poorly by the Democratic establishment. The fixation on like assault rifles or like the restrictions on like magazine size. I think that we fixate on a lot of the wrong things when it comes to gun policy. That'd probably be the biggest break I'd have with the Democratic Party's policies, I think.
Um, is there anything, you know, anything that you agree with the Republicans on, but not with the Democrats? So like something where they broadly disagree.
Depending on how they talk about implementation, I'm sure there are probably some Republicans. It's kind of the same thing that I would agree more like on gun policy on. I'd probably agree more than Democrats. But otherwise, it's really hard to be like a reasonable Republican today. I don't like the way the Democratic Party seems to demonize wealth. That's a little weird. Although some newer Republicans even a little bit seem like they might do that. But yeah, so that might be another position. But yeah.
Okay. Are are you yourself a nationalist? Like, do you love your country because it's your country?
Fuck no.
Do you see that as a problem or a bad thing if people do that?
I don't know. I mean, if it helps you feel more like okay with like paying taxes and shit, then I guess then that's probably a good thing. But when it turns into like an us versus them, or we're thinking that your country can do no wrong or whatever, I feel that as being like pretty negative.
Do you have any favorite TV shows?
Not at the moment. I haven't watched anything. I think the last TV show that I watched start to finish was probably Game of Thrones. I haven't watched anything in a long time. I just don't have the time.
And I assume that you were quite disappointed with the last few seasons.
Yeah, for sure. Holy shit.
Um. Okay. So the question asked before about policy with Democrats. Tripod wants to know what do you think are the issues with Democrats messaging wise?
I think that like Democrats can be pretty condescending sometimes in the way that they deal with people, and they're very quick sometimes to assume that like everybody is super hateful or racist, which is probably not good as well. Like different people believe different things for different reasons, and it's important to understand those reasons when you're trying to target your messaging to them.
Kingy wants to know, are you a globalist?
Probably, yeah. I don't know exactly how he means it, but most likely, yeah. For how most people would mean it, yeah.
Okay. Costas asks, why do you think humans made up morals, and do you think we need them in this day and age?
I mean, morals help us all kind of like live together and get along more, which like ensures like individually that we get along better as well, right? We're a social creature. We hunt in packs and have like civilizations or like villages of people that like help take care of young and diffuse responsibilities between tribes of people. So, yeah. I mean, yeah. So it seems like morals probably help like enforce that positive behavior that ensures the survival of groups of humans. Would be my guess.
Let's see. Stardog wants to know, what are some reasonable ways to encourage people to be more civically engaged in the U.S.?
It seems like having a greater interest in local politics might help because people feel like they have more impact there. But it seems like we've really lost all of our engagement locally with political scenes, that everybody kind of looks to national or international politics now and is not engaged on a local level. They don't feel as like impactful because they're not engaged on a local level. So maybe moving in like that direction that engages people on a local level more, on a more personal level, would be a more effective means getting people involved in political scenes.
USO wants to know, what are the important differences between men and women, if any?
So if we're talking about like the scientific biological category of men versus women, I mean the difference seems to be quite a few like underlying like physical structures. So men are more responsive to androgen. They develop different secondary and primary sexual organs. Same thing with women as well. It's possible that these hormones may or may not have an impact on like the development of the brain or the expression of certain thoughts. It's hard to say, separating like the environmental aspect with the biological one. From a social level, what are the differences between men and women? I mean, it depends on the society you're talking about, and it depends on the institution you're talking about. Like men and women gravitate towards different jobs, whether it's for biological and environmental reasons, hard to say. Men and women gravitate towards different interests, have different behaviors in like dating and relationships. Like, I mean, there's a huge difference between men and women. It's hard to say where these differences come from, though.
Are you a biological essentialist?
I don't believe so. Like a biological essentialist believes that there are. Hold on, I'm just looking at this. My understanding is that like a biological essentialist would believe that there is like a nature to like male or female that's like intrinsic to being male or female. The belief that human nature and individuals' personality is something is an innate or natural. Yeah, I don't think essentialism seems to be a dumb idea to have, but yeah, I'm not sure. The problem is that like genes express themselves in an environment, so in some ways like environmental and biological situations are inseparable. So to assume that there's some essential component of being male or female or having some characteristic or not having some characteristic, like that's so heavily tied into your environment, it seems really hard to believe that there's some essential characteristic past like very basic like metabolic facts, like humans consume food that has calories to survive. Like it seems hard to assume anything past that.
Okay. Let's see. Thinker wants to know, do you think PewDiePie dog whistles?
Do I think PewDiePie dog whistles? I don't know. I've seen a bit of PewDiePie. It feels to me more like mistakes that he makes is just kind of him being dumb or clueless, rather than like I find it hard to believe that PewDiePie is like a secret Nazi and he is knowingly like trying to, spread like certain hateful messages. It seems really hard for me to believe.
Let's see. Royal Chaotic has a question. Royal, are you there?
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead. You got a question about money?
Yeah. Destiny, what do you think about modern monetary theory?
I don't usually. It feels like most of the claims made by like modern monetary theory people are going to be made by people that already are like into like Keynesian economics. I don't know if we need like an entirely new monetary theory to explain like how monetary systems work. My understanding is that there's not much academic support behind it, and that most Keynesiasts, like Krugman and whatnot, will say things like, "Oh yeah, like modern monetary theory makes some interesting claims, but all of them are already accounted for like in the mainstream literature, and there isn't much like mainstream academic support for it." But I don't have like strong feelings about it. I guess I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Let's see here. Deepika wants to know, if something is an essential business, why is it even a business in the first place?
Why is it? I don't know. Oh, is he trying to imply that if it's an essential business, it should be nationalized? Whether or not something is a business privately run or publicly run doesn't really have to do with anything relating to like if it's essential or not. It just has to do with like, can a market provide for this or can a market not provide for this? So for instance, like clothing is essential, but it seems like clothes can be provided for pretty adequately by the market. So we let the market provide clothes. Whether something is essential or not essential, yeah, it has nothing to do with whether or not a market can provide for it or it should be nationalized. That's how I'm reading that question, man. I might be reading the question wrong, but.
Should we nationalize airlines?
I don't have a strong opinion on it. I think I could be swayed one way or the other pretty easily. I think right now I like lightly lean towards the idea that we should probably have at least one nationalized airline. It seems like it's almost impossible to run these things at a profit, which points to the idea that maybe it's just not a profitable industry. So maybe but it seems to be like pretty important. So if the market can't solve for it, then maybe the government should just run it.
Okay, and what are your thoughts on the recent bailouts, particularly with the airlines?
I mean, I think bailouts in general are probably a good thing, depending on how the money is allocated afterwards. Like, we don't really want to allow a fuck ton of businesses to fail and a fuck ton of investors and retirees and pension holders and workers to all get fucked because they're failing due to some like once in a lifetime massive like catastrophic event. So I mean, I think in general, I think bailouts are okay, especially considering if it's paid back or if the bailout money is given with strings attached, like it has to be used to like maintain workers. So you can't get a bailout and then start paying out dividends or firing off like half your staff or something. I think that that's generally okay.
What do you think of policies which tie, policies which limit CEO pay based on what the average pay of the workers is?
I think it's stupid. I don't think that has anything to do with anything. I don't know. The idea that like pay ratios between CEO and workers is important. I don't know. I just think it's dumb.
All right. If Donald Trump called you today and said, "Hey, I don't know what I'm doing here. Please tell me one thing I need to fix and what I need to do for a policy," what would your answer be?
Resign.
Supposing he said, "Give me another option."
The biggest thing that I'm in favor of getting rid of that I think would have a lot of positive downstream effects, I think, is the war on drugs. That whole everything related to it is a disaster in so many different ways. It negatively impacts things like the criminal justice system, border security, drug policy, medical research, tax revenues in states, like crime. Like, I think there are so many downstream negative impacts from the war on drugs that getting rid of that, I think, would be the single largest easy thing I could think of that could have like really positive downstream impacts.
You want to end the war on drugs, Destiny? I didn't know you were a libertarian.
Well, if we start talking about reducing the age of consent, then we'll get to libertarianism, okay?
All right. What do you think we should do with people who put pineapple on pizza?
I don't care. I don't like pineapple on pizza, but you know what, man? Knock yourself out. If you just want to eat a slice of something that just tastes like pineapple, then go for it.
All right, let's see here. All right. So this is an age-old question that's been plaguing us for centuries. Did Epstein kill himself?
I could totally see Epstein having killed himself. Like, that makes sense to me. But, like, at the very least, if I grant that, it does seem pretty weird that this guy wasn't on, like, massive fucking surveillance / lockdown. Like, I don't know how a target that high profile doesn't get, like, constant surveillance. That seems pretty weird. So, I can grant both halves there. Like, realistically, I could definitely see somebody like that killing themselves 100%. But then on the other hand, I don't know why he was left unattended such that he would even be able to do that, so...
All right. One user, I lost the name of the user. Sorry, whoever that was. Had a good question here. Do you think that, do you think people are oftentimes looking for drama and, some kind of big moment, and why do you think people are doing that?
People love drama, right? People look for drama in anything, whether it's Twitch streams or political drama or TV drama or personal relationship or friendship drama. Yeah, people love drama.
Easy enough. Ito wants to know, do you think that Republicans will be forced to appeal more to minority groups as U.S. demographics shift, or will they continue to employ tactics to minimize minority voting?
No, they'll have to change their rhetoric and their policy positions eventually if they want to remain politically relevant. Yeah, for sure.
What kind of policy positions do you think they would change to appeal to a minority voter?
I mean, things like border security or the ways that they address like ICE and whatnot, like that shit obviously has to change completely. And then minorities tend to be in more socioeconomically disadvantaged positions, so they would have to change their policies related to things like social safety nets and whatnot as well. That would be my imagination.
So I know there weren't a lot of them, but there were some polls showing that Trump had not strong, but compared to every other Republican president for the last 40 years, strong approval among black voters. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that Trump's actually, the voting patterns of black voters are changing, or do you think those are just anomalies?
I would have to see the exact polling data. My understanding is that even though he does better than previous Republican nominees, it's still pretty far below what Democratic support is, so...
Yeah, that's correct too, from what I've seen. I think the best one I saw was in the low 30s.
Mm-hmm.
So, which is, compared to, generally speaking, 9%. So.
Sure.
Real Chaotic wants to know, what benefit do landlords provide to society that housing cooperatives couldn't?
Lack of upfront capital investment. If I want to join a cooperative housing agency or a cooperative housing thing, I would need to have the upfront capital to buy a stake into that cooperative. Not everybody has it. Not everybody has the desire to participate in something like that. Yeah.
Um, let's see. Reggie wants to know, why do you think aliens aren't real?
I'm just agnostic. If they are real, we have no evidence of them. It seems like if they were real, it seems like we would have seen something by now, some sort of like radio wave or some sort of echo somewhere relating to them. The idea that if we haven't in the 100 years maybe or whatever we've been listening, and if they've had billions of years theoretically, or at least tens of millions, hundreds of millions of years to bounce some sort of radio wave out that we would have picked up, if we've seen nothing so far, the idea that we're going to see something because of the time scale of the universe, it seems incredibly unlikely, like approaching zero. But that's just my understanding. I don't know.
Are there any conspiracy theories that you believe?
Not really that I can think of. It depends on what you call a conspiracy theory, but probably not.
Okay. Tripod had a question here about Corona. Are you there, Tripod?
Yep, me again.
What?
Okay, do you think that Trump's inaction or downplaying of Corona, or do you think that China's supposed cover-up which do you think is more largely responsible for the severity of the Corona?
Trump's downplaying for sure, 100% easy.
Do you think there was any large-scale cover-up by China?
There might have been, but even with China not doing their due diligence initially reporting for it, other countries seem to be able to stop it way easier than the United States did. And the United States has the economic power and might and production to be so much further ahead of it than these other countries. There's no excuse for why South Korea could demolish us so hard on being prepared for something like this. Like, we have arguably some of the most sophisticated producers in the world, and we sat on it for a month and a half doing nothing about it. Is unexcusable.
And what do you think of the accusations of like World Health Organization, China collusion?
I would have to look more deeply into it, but my understanding is that like the initial statement from the WHO, like I think some people get really mad that in a very early statement they said that there was no evidence yet of human-to-human transmission, but I think within a week they basically said like, okay, we have evidence now. But even in that first news post, they had said that like more research is needed. It's essential that we do more research to figure out like what the mechanisms are for transmission from human to human or whatnot. So.
Okay, cool, thanks.
Cool Magician Dude asks, do you think the feasibility of the policy proposed in a platform should matter more than its cited goal?
Do you think the feasibility should matter more than the cited goal? What do you mean by feasibility? Like the chance of getting it passed, or?
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's probably the most important thing, because if there's no chance of it passing, then there's no point in anything about it, right? It doesn't mean anything.
KR Cartographer wants to know, what do you consider to be in the war on drugs? Do you think literally all drugs should be legal? And if not, what should the limits be?
I think I fall more and more on the idea that every single drug should be legal, and that addictions to certain types of drugs should just be seen as mental health problems. That healthy, like emotionally and mentally healthy people don't get addicted to heroin. That like this is stuff that like you like there are serious fuck ups in your life that are happening that need to be addressed, rather than just making the drug illegal on a blanket level. At the very least, things like marijuana or psychedelics or stuff like MDMA or whatever, like this stuff should absolutely not be illegal. And then like maybe for very hard stuff like related to like I guess like fentanyl or like opiates or whatever, maybe I'm like a little bit I could be swayed on those, but yeah, like it seems like most of the drugs that are traded right now probably shouldn't be illegal, and that would be like a really good first step. At the very least, stuff like marijuana or psychedelics, there's no reason for
that. If marijuana was legalized, do you think that could help farmers avoid the need for subsidies?
It's possible. I mean, it's hard to say how much farmers would grow. Like, I don't know how much marijuana would account for the total sale of crops from farmers, and I don't know how many like farmers live in land that can have marijuana growing on it or cannabis growing on it. It's hard to say.
Do you think media outlets should stop broadcasting Trump's press conferences if he continues to suggest treatments that are actually dangerous and harmful?
It's a really hard one. I think they should continue to do it, and then if more negative outcomes come as a result of that, then people won't vote for him in the future. But I mean, like, yeah, I mean, he's the president of the United States. Like, yeah, I think they should.
Is that a kind of accelerationist light take on that?
Maybe. I mean, I think it's more holding the president accountable for what he says.
Okay. Sorry. What would have to happen for you? This is from Jacob. What would have to happen in the world for you to become a socialist?
I don't know. Realistic policy paths that put a country on the line to socialism, and then empirical data showing that those policy paths are highly effective at alleviating certain problems.
So, I think you're setting your standard a little bit too high there. It's not fair.
Do you think what?
Oh, I was just kidding. I'm saying you're setting your standards too high there. That's not fair.
Oh, yeah.
Not that I have any clue what the hell this is about, but Thinker wants to know, what are your views on the recent H3H3 drama around donation shaming?
I have no idea. Is this related to the Invader V drama? I don't know what that's about.
Says no. What are your thoughts on the Free the Nipple campaign? Are you pro or anti-nipple?
I'm pro. I can't imagine people being against women showing their boobs in public. If people want to be able to show themselves in public, if they want to, then go for it. I think boobs are fine.
Oh, let's see. What are your thoughts on an extra tax on unhealthy foods like candy?
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good idea. I think we need to dramatically change our eating habits, and if taxing certain consumptions of certain foods is beneficial in getting people to change their eating habits, then I would say that's like an immensely positive thing.
All right. User Adtham wants to know, what other policies would you like to see in regards to improving the health of Americans?
I mean, food is a good start. Maybe more preferential treatment towards bikers in cities. Like, I know bike lanes and stuff are being built in a lot of areas, and then like building out like parking lots for bikes or bike racks or whatever. Maybe that can encourage people to do that more than driving everywhere. Otherwise, I can't think of anything outside of like food regulation or food taxing to do it.
Okay, more biker friendly.
Access to
laws.
high quality but tasty food for schools, I think, would be a really good place, or a really good place to start.
And you were saying you want what was it? More biker friendly legislation?
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, if it gets people to ride bikes more. Yeah.
So are you more of a Harley guy?
Not those kinds of bikes.
Costas wants to know, do you think you would be capable of flipping back to being conservative?
Who would be?
You.
Would I? I mean, anything's possible, I guess. It seems highly unlikely, though.
I'm pretty sure from a previous conversation you said you don't, but what would it take for you to believe in a deity?
I don't know, some sort of empirical proof or something. Seeing something change in the physical world as a result of a deity would be interesting. Something that can't be explained by physical phenomena.
Okay.
Wait, can you give me? I'm sorry. Can you give me like a couple minutes? I'll be right back. Hold on.
Yeah,
one second.
man.
I gotta make a quick call. All right. I'm sorry.
Sure,
I had to
yeah,
take a
fine.
call. All right. I'm here.
Oh, okay.
Thank God. Okay. What's up?
Hope everything's all right. So, but anyways, we'll just move on with this here.
Mhm.
Shoot, I'm in the wrong chat. I mean discussion. So I actually gotta ask you because this came up. We were messing around with your Twitch chat there, and have you seen Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul?
I watched all of Breaking Bad. I thought it was pretty good, pretty overrated, but I still thought it was good. And then I have not seen Better Call Saul yet.
It's better than Breaking Bad.
I've heard that a lot. Yeah, I didn't care about Saul at all as a character in the show, but apparently in Better Call Saul, he's like, you get a lot more of him, so it's better. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe someday I'll check it out.
I thought he stole the scene every time he was in Breaking Bad.
I mean, like, he was entertaining, but he's not anybody that I cared to ever learn more about, I guess. But that was just me, though. That yeah, I identified more with Walt. I thought he was the coolest character, although apparently everybody hated Walt, so I don't know.
User Division wants to know, why does Destiny only debate and critique right-wing laymen? Why doesn't he respond to right-wing experts?
It's really hard to get any type of expert on stream that will have like a dramatically different prescriptive opinion than me. The only one I can think of is probably I had a really good gun conversation with John Lott a while ago, but like in order to like in order to have a secondary conversation, there's like a lot of academic stuff that I need to go through to do it, and it's so much groundwork that there are like other issues that I'm looking into. I hope at one point maybe I can revisit a conversation with him, but otherwise there's not like a lot of like right-wing academics.
John Lott's good. I've seen him speak in person. I'm just gotta ask, what'd you think about what he had to say?
He seemed fairly reasonable when I spoke with him. The problem is that like John Lott is a highly educated person, so it's not a matter of just citing studies and seeing who has more data on their side. It's a matter of like critiquing studies as well, which for me takes a lot longer because I just don't have the academic background to do it. So it takes me a lot longer to go through individual studies or methodology problems that he cites. Like I have to look to other experts to see if these are other things that are complained about, or if he's being disingenuous, or if I have a poor understanding of something. Yeah.
Let's see here. You mentioned earlier about deplatforming as a way that's really effective to deal with white nationalists and the like.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anyone in particular you think needs to be deplatformed who hasn't been yet?
Like the only thing that I care about when it comes to deplatforming is like I don't like people that that spread massive amounts of disinformation, or people that just like blatantly lie about stuff. Like that's the stuff that I don't like. Like hate speech and shit, I don't care that much in terms of if it's out there. I mean, like, you shouldn't be hateful, but yeah, my biggest problem are people that contribute like a net negative to all public discourse, and I think that by coming out and lying about stuff that's not good.
Okay. Berkarov wants to know what you think about lobbying done by groups with specific cultural or ethnic ties. For example, AIPAC. Am I saying that right? AIPAC? The Israeli American.
Is this like some race realist Jewish shit? I'm sorry. What's the question again?
It's actually not. This is something that race realist Jewish type often would mention. But the question is, how do you feel about lobbying done by certain cultural or ethnic groups such as AIPAC? So this, it's not just.
I mean, like,
AIPAC,
anybody should probably be able to lobby, I guess, if they feel like they have a thing that's important that they feel like they want to be heard. Right? Lobbying is like a right, First Amendment right. If you want to lobby, then lobby.
Royal Chaotic wants to know, how would you deal with the epidemic of wage theft?
I don't believe that all wage is theft, or that all wage labor is theft.
Under what circumstances would you say that it is wage theft?
I don't believe in the concept of wage theft. I mean, there's possibilities, like if your employer is literally docking you hours and not telling you and stealing your wages, I mean, that would be bad. Or like, I mean, there are ways that you can abuse workers and stuff that's unfair or bad, but the concept of wage theft, that wage labor, that your profits are literally coming from thieving from your labor, I don't believe in that concept. So.
Reggie wants to know, have you ever played Kingdom Hearts? If no, would you be interested?
I played Kingdom Hearts 1, and I thought it was surprisingly, it was a really stupid concept, but I thought it was really well done. I really loved Kingdom Hearts 1. I didn't get to play 2 or 3, but I heard that because of that director guy, I heard that it got insanely, unbelievably, horribly stupid. Like Metal Gear Solid 2 plus levels of like incomprehension.
Star Trek or Star Wars?
Probably they're so different. They're two. I don't know if they're comparable. I mean, I would say Star Trek though.
All right. Umgo wants to know what happened to the diversity podcast you were planning.
I don't think I've heard a diversity podcast. I have an idea for a podcast I want to do where I bring on like academics to talk about more serious things. And I'd finally gotten an email chain going back and forth with the local university. I was going to bring on a healthcare expert to talk about social healthcare. And then the COVID-19 shit started, and then I lost contact with everybody because they said their resources were going towards dealing with the epidemic. So, fuck me.
Starlight wants to know, what resources do you use to keep up with current events?
I mean, anything. I mean, I can see like a news story on Reddit, and then I can Google around and read different sources on it. But yeah, I mean, typically, like, I'll go like New York Times, Washington Post, sometimes The Intercept. I mean, it just depends on the story. I think that like Reuters and like the AP, Associated Press, I think like do the best job when it comes to like reporting. And then like I think WAPO or the New York Times does like okay, like writing up about stories. And then for like more in-depth stuff, sometimes Vox is okay. Sometimes Slate, I think, and The Atlantic both seem to do like really solid work from what I've seen as well.
All right, and what is it? Jeff Bezos and well, it's really Amazon. Amazon in recent years had some times when they paid virtually no taxes. Do you think this is a problem?
Nope. Like generally we don't tax businesses on losses. If people want to change something that would make it so that you would tax Amazon on their losses, like that change in the tax code would be so radical and would fundamentally destroy probably most businesses in the United States. It seems very strange to, yeah, I don't know. Whenever somebody has problems with the way that Amazon pays taxes, I always ask them what part of the tax code they would change, and they're utterly silent. So.
All right, but I am kind of curious about this because I generally agree with you on this, but I do find it a little bit odd that there are certain businesses like Amazon where they have their whole business model, not their whole thing, I'm sorry, but a large part of it is about tax avoidance, and so they'll basically reinvest all of their profits so they don't have profits.
Yeah, that's fine. That's okay. Like, we want companies to be reinvesting their money, right? It means more growth in a business. It usually means better things for consumers to buy, and hopefully it means more workers getting paid or like more jobs being created, ideally, right? If they're reinvesting profits into new net positive value investments rather than just paying it out as dividends or whatever. Politicians that criticize Amazon are cowards. Okay, they're babies. If you really have a problem with it, then talk about changing the tax code. Like the reality is that we shouldn't have corporate taxes at all in America. We should just be taxing individuals at higher rates. Like that's the real answer. And then we can get rid of all the bullshit surrounding like, well, what should a corporation pay or carry forward losses be a thing? Blah 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 blah. Well, fuck. Like this is one of the few things I think that like all economists agree on is that corporate taxes are shit. Just like up the tax rate for individuals. Like up the capital gains rates, up the higher parts of the federal tax brackets. That's it. Like that would be like a more effective way of dealing with things. People that cry about like Amazon using tax havens and shit, like fuck you. Like if you don't like tax havens, make them illegal. Do something about it legislatively. Don't just try to shame some company into not utilizing a resource that every other company or business is going to utilize. Like that's
Okay. So this is a common refrain. What do you think about the falling rate of profits? Is this a long-term problem?
Isn't the falling rate of profits, aren't those one of the big irreconcilable problems in like Marxist ideology? I don't remember. I would have to go back and read this. I knew more about this at one point in time, but
the communists often say that the fall of capitalism is inevitable due to the falling rate of profits.
I don't know enough about that to have like a well-informed opinion on it.
Okay. KR Cartographer wants to know, do you think there are any foreign politicians the Democrats should learn from?
I mean, I guess it would depend on what the particular issue was, I guess, huh? Like it's possible that maybe like the United States could learn little bit about like from South Korea from their preparedness for the coronavirus stuff. It's possible that maybe America could learn a little bit from Western countries, not particularly their politicians, but like their styles of government. So they have more like coalition governments. So like third parties are more of a thing. But in terms of like individual politicians that are individual politicians should learn from, I don't know. I'm not entirely. Yeah.
Ito wants to know, what do you think has been more harmful, Trump's rhetoric or his policy response to COVID-19?
Probably the policy response, but the rhetoric has been pretty harmful as well.
All right. Picky Go Moo has a few questions here. What are your thoughts on the relaxing of FDA standards when it comes to testing and rollout of the COVID-19 vaccines?
I think there was a New York Times story that was posted recently about this, but I didn't read it. And I think it had something to do with the idea that the FDA might have been a little bit too lax in terms of their standards, but I don't know. I didn't read the story, so I don't have a good opinion on that at the moment.
Okay. If it's made available, should anti-vaxxers be allowed to not get the vaccine for COVID-19?
Probably not. That'd be a pretty good meme though.
Have you noticed that the whole anti-vax movement has kind of been quiet lately?
Have they been? I don't know. The only thing I know about the anti-vax movement are like memes that I see posted on Reddit. It's possible that they're just as loud as they always have been, and I'm just not in those communities, so I don't see it.
I've known some people that were pretty loud anti-vaxxers, and just suddenly they went away during coronavirus. What are your thoughts on the Panama Papers?
Those are the papers that came out like a really long time ago that showed supposedly a bunch of like really bad financial collusion and shit, or like practices between large leaders in business. I don't actually remember any of the specifics about them, so I don't know. I know that a lot of people are mad that apparently nothing came out of it. So I don't
know. What do you think about the U.S. intervention in Latin America over the latter part of the 20th century? And do you think the CIA and other groups are still doing things like that around the world secretly?
I don't know like how much we're concerned with it now, like past the whole Cold War. Like I don't know if the CIA is quite as obsessed with like getting certain regimes in place in South America. It seems like we're more concerned about that in the Middle East right now. But I'm not as well researched on all the different types of intervention that we've been in every South American country to know like the best answer on that.
Okay. Operacat wants to know, why are you playing League? I thought you lost Dan's bet.
We're watching a VOD of it right now on stream. He must be confused.
Is art getting better or worse?
I think that like overall there's like a greater diversity of art today. In the mainstream it might seem like it's getting worse because it's so heavily commercialized, but it feels like if you're really concerned with finding good art, like you can probably find it, right? Like people point to music and it's like, why do you think music sucks today? And they're like, well, just listen to like Nicki Minaj and blah blah blah. And it's like, okay, well that's like the most mainstream stuff like on the radio right now. Like, is that your go-to? Like you can find like a lot of original good music out there. You just have to look for it. But if your only exposure to music is going to be on the radio, then of course you're not gonna hear anything amazing.
Do you think Elvis is the king?
No, I don't care about Elvis music.
Thinker wants to know, what are your thoughts on people donation shaming Jeff Bezos for donating $100 million when his net worth is $100 billion?
Stupid. I mean, like, you can never donate enough. Like, these people, one of the things I don't like about a lot of kind of the newer progressive people is they literally, like, they do like what conservatives used to claim Democrats did a long time ago, is they literally demonize the fuck out of wealthy people. Like, it's no longer like inequality is bad or workers not getting paid enough is bad or anything like that. It's literally like billionaires themselves, like, by virtue of being a billionaire, you're evil, which is really fucking weird to me. Also, like, a lot of the people that come out and criticize these people are oftentimes like very, very wealthy YouTubers. You know, like people like H Bomber Guy or Sean and Jen are like top 1% income earners in the UK, and they're not publicly donating to anything or posting their donation receipts or whatever. So, I mean, I don't know. It all just seems like a big like virtue signaling game.
Okay. Let's see here. I don't know much about this, but Cartographer wants to know: do you think that use corporate taxes on U.S. companies like Google are wrong?
Do I think U.S. corporate taxes on companies like Google are wrong?
No, the EU taxes on U.S. companies.
What can you, like, in regards to what?
I don't know. Sorry, there's a lot of questions here where I
Sure,
don't know.
yeah, I don't know. I don't know everything about every policy from every country around the world. I don't know. I just don't know.
Well, why are we even bothering and talking to you, man? Jeez.
Yeah.
I'm kidding. Let's see. What are your thoughts on Cuba?
I don't know. It's a beautiful place, depending on where you go. I mean, like, it seems like the people are pretty impoverished there. Like, should the U.S. normalize their relationships with Cuba? I think that'd be good. I think Barack was on the right track with that. But other than that, yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
Let's see. Let me see if we can find any more generic, vague questions here. Why do you care so much about policy and not theory?
Because policy has more like on the ground like interest to me than just like theory that is without policies. Like, I don't know, it just comes off as like a bunch of white people arguing about like the coolest thing they read on Twitter the other day. I don't know, it's just really, really, really boring to me. I think theory can be interesting, but it sucks when people get so obsessed with theory that they don't have policy or they don't want to talk about policy, or worse yet. So like what people like Vaush do is claim that people that talk about policy but don't talk about theory as much have like no realistic solutions to anything. Like, that's really sad, I think.
Stardog wants to know, what are your thoughts on the value-added tax?
VAT seems like an okay idea, but I mean, it feels like whether you do VAT or sales tax, like at the end of the day, the consumer's going to pay for it anyway, like as the ultimate buyer of any good or service. So I guess maybe I could read more about VAT, but it doesn't seem like it does something substantially different than sales tax.
What are your opinions on labor unions and right to work?
Labor unions seem like a cool meme. These are really vague questions. I mean, I mean, like, labor unions can be good or bad. In America, they probably need a little bit more protection than they do now. And then right to work laws, I can't imagine it the other way around. I don't know. It'd be interesting to see like what. In terms of like what the opposite would look like, I guess if implemented as like American policy, I'm not sure.
Do you think business cooperatives are a good thing?
Yeah, they can be, sure.
And would you rather fight a lion or a cheetah?
Probably a cheetah. Lions are pretty fucking huge. I think I'd get pretty destroyed by one. Cheetahs are smaller. You probably have a higher chance of killing it. If you had to, but I don't imagine my chance to be very good against either one.
An enemy is unstoppable.
Let's see here. Oh, here's a good specific one. What are your thoughts on America?
America's a swell country.
All right. Adam wants to know, would anything ever make you turn towards a monogamous relationship?
I don't know, maybe someday, but not right now. I don't really have a desire for one though.
What's a topic or policy that you feel very strongly about, enjoy talking about, but don't get the chance to talk about often?
Probably almost anything. I don't really get to talk about very many policies much at all because usually people like just get hung up on being able to understand like a stat or a graph, or people like get hung up on like what is actually the case or not. So like honestly, like any sort of policy discussion is like interesting to me, but very rarely do I get to have an actual discussion about policy. It usually boils down more to like can you understand like a news story, or are you interpreting like a graph correctly? It's like generally what's going on.
Here. Royal Chaotic has a question. Where are you in the chat? Here you go. Are you there, Royal Chaotic?
Hey, can you hear me?
You got a question about price signals?
Yeah. So, Destiny, what do you think? Do you think price signals are necessary, and if so, why?
What is a price signal? Is that like when like a certain product is being bought more or less or whatever, that it signals like a supply demand kind of thing in terms of like how pricing should go, or
The way it's been...
the way what? Your mic cut out.
Oh, sorry. The way it's been explained to me is the reason why like a free universal like food wouldn't work is because like there wouldn't price signal. So like
The reason why a free universal what wouldn't work?
so like the way it's been explained to me is that like price signal is good to
You're real quiet, man.
Yeah, you're super quiet.
Sorry, I need to put the mic next to me. Can you hear me?
Hold on, I gotta turn you up like 200%. 1 second. Okay, who's talking right
Try
now?
just yelling at us.
Hello?
Royal
There
Chaotic.
you go.
Okay, I'm turning you up. Okay, go.
Okay, can you hear me now?
A little bit, yeah, go.
Okay, so basically, like the way it's been explained to me is that price signals are like an item having a price, basically. So like that's why you can't make things free, because like producers wouldn't know the demand. So basically, what you said.
Okay.
Like, do you think price signals are necessary or not?
I
Like,
guess
for
it seems
pricing.
like they would be. Like without a price signal, how would you know how anything is priced about anything? I guess. I don't know I don't understand. Or like what is the
I mean-
alternative if nobody knows how to set a price on anything? What's the alternative to that? What does that mean?
I mean, I guess the alternative or whatever for like specific food, if we're talking about a specific policy, I guess it would be, you like order a meal and then you go to like your kitchen or whatever, or like the restaurant, like the local kitchen, and then they give you an order. So it'd be like surveys, I guess.
I don't know anything besides like if this is like if you're trying to ask like a stealth communist question about like just arbitrarily setting prices or something, I don't believe that's ever been demonstrated to work, and I don't think it can work, so I don't think that's a good idea. I don't know if that's what you're getting at, that we could like use non-market based things to set prices. That doesn't seem to be the case though. Like I've never seen like a proposed alternative that has any empirical validation in terms of working ever, but it sounds interesting. I guess I've just never seen it before. So
Okay. I mean, I guess like, do you have like speculations on why that wouldn't work?
what? Well,
Or, like,
because it doesn't seem to like I mean, you've got things like the calculation problem, like the idea that setting like prices for every single consumer good or even some consumer goods in society is a ridiculously impossible thing for like a central government to do. And then the idea that like changing prices or changing availability of like certain resources would make it impossible for a government to adapt quick enough to like changing some things. But I mean, like that's part of the same thing I said. Yeah, I guess mainly the calculation problem is what I would cite there.
I may be overrunning, so I'm just gonna finish it off here. What if it like were specific production, so like specific items like housing?
What if it what? Say that again.
What if it were specific commodities such as like housing or such?
I mean,
setting
I guess a
setting
government
policy.
could do it. I just don't see the advantage of it at all.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. All right, be careful.
All right.
Wait, his mic was
Um,
really quiet, right? I'm not crazy, or I don't need to turn my Discord out?
I mean, I'm not gonna say you're not crazy, but his mic was really quiet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, just checking. Okay.
This is an interesting question from FW. How often are you in the business mindset for streaming versus just hopping on and playing games? What sort of balance do you strike to make sure your business needs are being met versus just having fun?
I generally just play games, and then it usually works. Like, I don't think much about, like, I mean, I do a lot of business, like, off-stream, but typically I just do what I want on-stream. I'm not usually optimizing for, like, viewership or whatever. I usually just do what I want.
Oh, jeez. So you do answer, a lot of questions on broad topics. And Maximix here thinks that you're able to answer things convincingly, even if you're not, very well versed in it. And he wants to know how did you learn to answer broad questions so convincingly.
It depends on the question, but I mean, generally it's just a matter of repetition. Like, usually, like, I talk about certain topics so much that, like, I have to be able to answer them just because I do so much. Like, it would be kind of weird if I couldn't.
And Tripod has a question. You hear Tripod?
Yep.
Go ahead.
Okay, so you debate conservatives mostly. From my observations of your debates with him, it usually comes down to, rather than policy debates, it's a lot about feelings debates of the way they feel about reality, and you're mostly disagreeing with their interpretation of how the world actually is,
Mhm.
rather than the policy itself and the morality of the policy. Based on your observations of that with these random pundits or random people on Twitter you find, based on that and your observation of politics itself, do you think it's likely that conservative politicians themselves, like major conservative politicians, people like Mitch McConnell and stuff, not so much Trump because I think he's a bit of an exception, do you think they likely also act largely on feelings rather than facts?
Yeah, I think to some extent everybody acts on feelings rather than facts. It just seems like at the moment the Republican establishment is it's more beneficial to their narrative to kind of ignore most of the facts, is what it seems.
So you'd say it's more of a malicious ignoring of the facts rather than...
I don't know, like, it's hard to ascribe, like, intent. Like, it's hard to say that it's maliciously done, like they know the facts and they choose to ignore them. More so that, like, most people don't build their worldviews around facts. Like, generally they just build worldviews around, like, what feels right or what feels the best. Like, we're very emotionally driven people. Most people are. So I think most people probably work that way. Probably is true on the left and right. But it seems like the right doesn't line up with reality as much as the left seems to right now. At least
So
in
you'd say
American
the
politics.
Democrats... So you'd say the Democrats are better for that?
Yeah, right now, like, if we're having a conversation about do you think climate change is real, it doesn't feel like I'm going to get a debate from a Democrat about that. Whereas, like, on a Republican, I definitely would.
Okay, cool. Cheers.
All right.
All right. Do you think that the U.S. should pull out of the Middle East?
No, not entirely. We've got, like, there's too much vested interest there, and there are too many other people that, like, are fucking around there as well. So it doesn't really make sense for us to just pull out entirely.
All right, you guys heard it here. Destiny doesn't believe in pulling out.
Nice.
Let's see here. This is a good one. Is a hot dog a sandwich?
I'm going to go ahead and say no.
Do you think South Korea's history of jailing top politicians contributes to the effectiveness of its government?
I don't know enough about South Korea's jailing of politicians to know. I'm not sure.
This is an interesting question. Put in a situation where you have to pick one or the other, do you think you would side with communists or fascists?
Probably communists, because their ideology at least isn't racialized like fascists are. Generally, they are, at least.
All right. And What are your thoughts are? I'm sorry. What are your thoughts on the border? As I understand it, you're against building the wall. Are you for open borders though?
I mean, it'd be nice to track people easier, but in general, I think that the U.S.'s immigration should be way more open than it already is. Like, let people allocate themselves as they'd like, and then, you know, track people, make them citizens, stuff like that. Collect them under the tax base and whatnot.
Do you support statehood for Puerto Rico?
Yeah, I think so. I don't see why we wouldn't, but I haven't heard amazing arguments for or against it, so I'm not entirely sure. But I mean, it seems like a good idea.
What do you think are the chances of Trump getting reelected?
I'm not sure. I think it could go either way right now. I don't know. I'm leaning right now towards thinking Biden probably has a better chance, though. But it's going to depend on things like the economy, like coming into the election.
Do you think coronavirus will still be a major issue?
No
in
clue. I don't know how. We might forget about it in a year and like just not talk about it anymore. It's hard to say. I don't know.
Some states have already started to open up again. Do you think that this is an okay choice to make? Do you think it's too risky?
I would go by whatever the medical experts are saying. My understanding is that Fauci said it's premature to do it. So if he says it, then I would say it's probably premature to do it.
What are your thoughts on plastic straw bans?
My understanding was that like overall this doesn't really make much of a difference in terms of like it doesn't really make much of a difference in terms of like environmental impact. So like people do it to feel good, but it doesn't really help much. So in that case, I don't really care. Probably dumb. If that's true though.
Do you think actions of a single nation done without treaties with other major players around the world can make a significant impact on global warming?
Probably not. I don't think so. I think it has to be like enforced throughout the world.
Do you think that we, as far as like climate change, you know, a lot of people are saying, you know, things like, you know, if we don't take drastic action in 10 years, 20, 30 years, whatever, basically, if we don't take drastic action soon, we're going to reach a point of no return. Do you see any validity to those claims?
That we have like a certain amount of time to act, otherwise the world is basically fucked.
Yeah, a short window.
I mean, that seems to be what we hear from climate scientists. I mean, I don't have any reason to disagree or go against the grain on that. So, yeah, it seems like we either have a short window to act or we've already missed the window, and now we're just trying to minimize future harm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Do you believe that the U.S. defense budget is too large?
I don't know. I mean, we pay a lot of people to the military, and the United States like takes over military actions for like a lot of countries around the world. I don't know if our budget is too large or too small. I'm less concerned with the size of our budget and more what's the direction of our foreign policy, and are we funding other things in our economy is usually what I'm more concerned with. So like having a huge military budget and no social health care seems to be a little cringe, or like certain actions that we've taken on a foreign policy level seem to be a little cringe, but I would focus more on those than some arbitrary number that our budget is set at, I think.
What are your thoughts on capital punishment?
My main idea regarding any type of punishment is that it should be rehabilitative. Capital punishment is kind of the opposite of that because you're literally killing people. I mean, it's possible that there are some people that maybe could never ever be rehabilitated, in which case it probably should be capitally punished. I don't know if we can make that decision, but in general, I'm probably against it, I'd say.
Dragonite wants to know how many genders are there?
Probably two.
Oh, spicy. What are your thoughts on is it just called student choice? The idea of parents. Oh yeah, school vouchers. I'm sorry, I'm retarded. School vouchers.
What are my thoughts on school vouchers?
Mhm.
The idea that you'd be able to go to like different school districts or whatever.
Yep.
I think generally things that allow you to not pay attention to the fucked upness of certain schools is probably not good. So I'm not a big fan of school vouchers. Basically, you're just taking people that can afford to bus their kids or drive their kids to other schools. They're going to be doing better than people that are kind of stuck in their own shitty public school. We should probably focus on improving the public school system rather than giving people vouchers to escape shitty public school systems. I don't know. Like a voucher basically seems like a voucher saying like we acknowledge that this public school is fucked, but rather than fixing it, we're going to give some people the opportunity to get away. I don't know. That's
All right. And if Phil, up to you, how would you change the U.S. education system?
I don't know. I know that some countries take like pretty different approaches. Like I think like Finland and Norway have different approaches to how they do education. Doing like studies of other countries and seeing their approach versus ours would probably be a place I would start. But in terms of like specific prescriptions, I don't know. I just haven't researched like different forms of education a lot to really know.
All right. Do you have any thoughts about the budget crisis that's been going on for a while in Detroit?
No clue. I don't know anything at all about what that's about.
Okay. Okay. Have you had? Mike wants to know: have you baked anything tasty during quarantine?
Nope. I don't bake at all.
Once things start opening up again, was there anything particular you're looking forward to going back to doing that you have stopped?
There's like a restaurant around here called Din Tai Fung that serves like dumplings. I really like those.
So recently Congress had a relief package that mostly focused on businesses. Of course, you know, everyone's getting the $1,200. They're Trump bucks. A lot of people have criticized this for being too focused on businesses and not enough on people. Do you have any thoughts on that?
The amount of money that's being paid to people seems a little bit comical. Like $1,200. I don't know how much that helps any American family. Like, or even $2,400 for like 2.5 months. It's supposed to be for 10 weeks, right? I don't know. That seems like kind of silly to me. I don't understand that. Unless like more is going to be allocated soon, which I think some banks are saying that they plan on like more money being made available soon. In which case, yeah, that'd be better. But
Okay, but so do you have any issues with the money going towards large businesses as opposed to?
no, I mean businesses getting paid money that is supposed to be spent towards like employee paychecks or whatever. I think is okay for like employee retention, so a ton of people don't get laid off. I think if that's how it's being like provisioned, I think that's acceptable. And my understanding is that a lot of those PPP loans are done with those strings attached. That you have to be using it to pay for like wages and shit for your workers.
All right. What are your thoughts on private prisons?
It seems to be a bad meme. I don't know why you would want to incentivize like private industry for having more prisoners. I don't like that idea.
There's been a lot of suggestions that the misaligned incentives. People have been judges have been trying to push. Lawmakers or judges. Basically, the state has been trying to push more people towards prisons. Do you believe any of that's been going on?
That like different lobbyists are trying to push people towards like prisons or
State agents, which I guess that they're being lobbied. Same thing.
Yeah, I mean, my understanding is that that definitely happens. That there are like that like certain companies will lobby for like governors to like increase the like they basically for private prisons to run. Don't they have like operating quotas? And it's like if you don't like have this minimum number of prisoners in our prisons, we're going to shut down. So governors are kind of like pressured to make sure that those stay full. That was my understanding. I could be wrong on that, but yeah, I mean, if that's true, obviously that's like we consider it like a perverse incentive or whatever, right? Like we don't want like a private company incentivized on having like more people locked into prison is probably not a good thing for society. It's like a bad market force.
Um,
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, just seeing all the dumb questions one after the other.
Yeah. No problem.
I haven't heard about this idea. Do you have any thoughts on plans for government tracing via smartphones and social media platforms to streamline the end of the COVID crisis?
Maybe if it's done on an opt-in level. That's a pretty spooky move by the government, though. I don't know how I would feel about that. The results would have to be astounding. I'm curious, like how much of South Korea's dealing with the COVID-19 virus was due to their ability to so heavily track people's cell phones. You don't know. That's like a major cost. So there would have to be like a super positive benefit for that to be worth it, I think.
Okay. So in my understanding, you're generally anti-war. Are there any wars that the U.S. has been involved in the since World War II that you would say was a good choice to be involved in?
I mean, that my history is not my strongest subject. I mean, I would say like the way that the United States ended, like what happened in Bosnia, was really positive. And then I'm sure that the U.S. has probably had positive involvement in other conflicts. I don't know much about them. Yeah, maybe South Korea.
All right. Wrapping up here is a couple more questions. Do you think people use social media like Facebook and Twitter too much? Like, do you think it's unhealthy?
Yeah, I mean, like every psychological like evaluation I've ever seen related to social media pretty much shows that people engage with social media in really unhealthy ways and that it has like a big detriment to society.
Yeah, if I remember right, I don't want to get anything too personal. Please tell me to shut up if this is. But I mean, you have a kid, right?
Yeah.
Do you plan on restricting their access to like social media and stuff like that?
I don't know how I feel about that yet. My kind of policy is generally like I like to have like open conversations with my son, and then if I feel like he's having a problem based on the conversations we have, I would restrict access from there. So for instance, like there's a big question of like, so I grew up watching like really bad horror movies and stuff that I probably shouldn't have been watching at that early of an age. So when it comes to him like playing games like Five Nights at Freddy's and whatnot, I usually just try to talk to him. Like sometimes he has like a lot of nightmares related to these games, and if that happens, then it's like, okay, well, we're gonna curb back that. But if it seems like he's handling it well and he's pretty mature about it, then it's probably okay.
All right, so if you guys want to ask any last minute questions, we're going to wrap up here in a few minutes. Post those in Destiny questions. Are you for getting money out of politics?
Am I for getting money out of politics? Well, I mean, are you asking if I want to change it to like public funding versus private funding? I don't know. I haven't considered all the ramifications. On a surface, like public funding sounds okay, but I don't know enough. Like I know that there are sometimes things that we overlook where things sound like a good idea, but we don't necessarily know like how it'll play out at the end. Like for instance, like if there's like a political campaign or group that I really support, should I really not be allowed to donate like whatever the FEC minimum is for doing it or maximum is for doing it? I don't know how I feel about that. I feel like on its surface, I'm okay with public funding. I'm just not sure what the downstream impacts of that would be.
Do you believe in reparations?
I feel like the money should probably be spent in a better way than just like giving checks to people. I don't know. That would be like another empirical question. I'd have to see like, I mean, I'd be for like trying it on like small scales. Like maybe there's some community and they try it out and it has like a super positive impact on said community. In which case that would be cool.
All right. Royal Chaotic wants to know if you have any thoughts about megacities and centralization.
I've heard different theories on like how we could do like urban planning a lot differently that would be more beneficial to society, and that like the invention of like automobiles has led to really destructive ways in which we organize cities. And if that's true, then yeah, I'd be in favor of like not doing that. I'm not sure.
Do you think the government, that is the federal government, should have any policies towards specific areas that are failing? For for example, coal towns in West Virginia, towns just built around coal mining, and then the mine shuts down.
Yeah, I mean, if industries
half
are
the town's
dying or failing, then I think that we should definitely like find some way to help certain people that are disaffected by that, right? Like, this is part of the problems with globalism, is that oftentimes the benefits are spread throughout all of society, but the detriments are felt like hyper focused on like a particular community. And if that's the case, then like we have to find a way to collect the benefits and then distribute them to the people that are being negatively impacted.
And are there any policy proposals in response to that you would particularly support?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the particular like globalization thing we're talking about. So like for H-1B visas, if these are worth so much to companies, like companies could probably pay more money for H-1B visas, and then maybe the money that gets paid out to that can go towards like, can literally just be cash transferred to people that are negatively impacted by, immigration related stuff. Or if certain companies take advantage of like importing supplies, maybe a tax can exist on said supplies that that is redistributed towards people that are like that worked in manufacturing or some sort of job related stuff that they've lost now in the US locally. I mean, stuff like that, like sort of like cash transfers from companies that take advantage of exporting supply chains to people that have lost out on their jobs being exported, basically.
Do you think we should do anything to stop? Actually, I'm sorry, let me rephrase this. Do you see a problem with companies getting local tax incentives to move their businesses to a certain area? Like if New York, I think New York has a policy, like if you move a major business operation there, they'll give you no taxes for 10 years or something like that.
It feels like a race to the bottom sometimes. I don't know if the solution is that cities should have like a coalition with each other to not do that. Or if that should be like federally enforced. But yeah, that feels like a bad thing when cities are really quick to cuck themselves out of tax revenue because they want to bring a company to their particular city. I think it's probably bad.
Right. And last question here, we'll end on this one. Rural Chaotic wants to know, do you think a person who is intoxicated is able to consent?
I mean, if you do before, it depends on how intoxicated you are, and it depends on your relationship with the person, and it depends on what kind of conversations you had prior to becoming intoxicated.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it, Destiny. It's been a while, and it's always a pleasure, man.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, you can always email me again in the future. Maybe we'll do one in the future too. Yeah.
All right, would love to do that again. So guys, I'm gonna put his the link to his Twitch stream in announcements. It's also gonna be in the Destiny discussion. If you guys would like to check that out and subscribe, you can go ahead and do that. If you want to just enjoy the afterglow, chat in here, you're welcome to leave this chat and rejoin, and you will be able to speak. So the permissions are changed. Let me just double check this real quick. Nope, I fucked them up again. All right. So yeah. If you guys leave and rejoin the chat, you'll be able to speak. I'll go through and manually unmute a few people. I just got a message from Mighty Main. Why are you allergic to UBI? Look, man, I think you might have came in late. We already asked about UBI.
Yeah, I mean, I personally, I don't care. I mean, if people want to talk about it, it sounds interesting. I'm a really big fan. Like, there are certain questions about certain policies that have like big question marks hanging over them, because we just don't know what the impact would be. My understanding was that was it in Toronto or someplace in Canada, I thought, where they were doing like a decent sized experiment related to UBI. And they were waiting for the outcome of that. I don't know if that was canceled or not, but stuff like that would be interesting to see how it impacts those communities. Like, I don't have like a principled stance for or against UBI. I'm just curious, like, if it actually improves like living conditions or working conditions. Oh, Quebec it was.
Yeah, I think it was canceled.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Destiny,
What's up?
why won't you debate all hype?
I've talked to him in the past, but like engaging with people like that is just so irresponsible. Because he spends so much time digging his stuff up that I would rather leave it to the academics that shit on him instead of like me trying to do it myself. I don't have the time to sift through all of that stuff.
Okay, can I get unbanned on your server?
And go through my mods. I don't do anything like that. Good luck.
Yo, Destiny,
What?
I have a question for you about Hong Kong. Should it be independent, under Chinese rule, or under British rule?
I mean, ideally they would be under their own rule, I guess. I would imagine for Hong Kong people. Realistically, I don't know what it would look like, how that would actually turn out, if they could rule themselves, or if I'm not sure.
Yeah, Destiny, I got one question for you, alright?
What's up?
So, I don't know, you've been shitting on Sean and Jen for quite a while.
Yeah,
What's up with
I
that?
think the burning your bus stuff is like really toxic. I don't like that at all.
Is he burning a bus?
Yes.
Also, would you? Okay, so you've been using the term Uncle Tom a lot.
Not usually. It's pretty rare that I use it. I don't think I've used that term in like in a couple years since I argued with that one lady or whatever. But what
Would you
about
say that would you say that calling somebody an Uncle Tom is racist?
I don't know. I mean, like, so Uncle Tom is like the word that people use for like a token black figure. Whether or not it's like racist, I don't know. I've heard like arguments for and against it from like black and white people. It's easier just to call somebody a token than to use Uncle Tom, because some people like will immediately go down the racist route with it. So you should probably just call somebody a token rather than an Uncle Tom, even though it's kind of the same thing. But yeah, I don't know. I don't have like a really strong opinion on that.
I have a
Destiny.
question. Oh,
What's up?
I,
Oh, you go.
I have a question for you about free speech. So last time I talked to you, you said that I asked a question. You said that like you didn't want to protect intentional misinformation. So
Yeah.
how would that apply to people like Dick Cheney, who like, or like people who promoted like overthrowing Guatemala back in a long time ago, using intentional misinformation to do that?
I mean, it would probably make them culpable of like really bad things.
Should they like go to jail or something?
Well, my stance has never been that like people that spread misinformation should go to jail. I just wish it wasn't platformed in places. So I mean, like if Dick Cheney was like had a Twitter account, it should be banned. But I mean, like obviously the crimes of the Bush administration are a little bit greater than being banned from social media. Like, yeah, there probably should be some sort of repercussion there, but I don't know if that's ever gonna happen. So.
So how can you be for abortion but also be against the death penalty at the same time? Talk about morally.
Before
don't understand
abortion,
that.
but against the death penalty. Well, so the question comes down to whether or not you think that like fetuses get moral consideration for abortion. That's basically what it comes down to, right? And if you think they don't, then abortion is okay. And then whether or not you're for or against the death penalty comes down to whether or not you believe like in rehabilitative justice versus punitive justice versus like revenge or punishment justice. Like it's not really. I don't think those two are
Well,
related.
would you consider like somebody like a psychopath, right, or somebody like Tim Bundy, that those type of people don't deserve more consideration?
I don't know. That's a really hard one to say whether or not like a human deserves it or can lose it. Gets into some really tough areas. So like for instance, like would we say, let's say somebody rapes a child, does that person deserve moral consideration? Like it's pretty easy in cases like that to be like no. But it's like, well, what if this person was like raped and abused by like a sick uncle for like 9 years of their life, like locked in a basement, and then they came out at 18 and they were like a certain way, like
Pepe
things get like a lot
wins.
shadier. Like obviously it doesn't make it okay to fucking rape children, but like the way that people are like due to like how they were brought up or things they've experienced in their life, like makes it a lot harder to be like, oh, this person is like the idea of like saying some person is inherently evil, I think like misses the mark in terms of like why people are the way they are. I don't think people are born like evil or a certain way or whatever, and I think it's good to be aware of that.
You're
But I mean,
dodging
I
his
don't.
original question.
What?
Yeah, you are kind of judging. Yeah, you kind of like.
You're dodging it.
What am I dodging?
Well, do you value human life?
Yeah, I think you have to. Yeah, because I want people to value my life, right?
Well, abortion negates that.
Well, no, because people would argue that like abortion wouldn't be considered like human life, right?
So would you be?
How can you scientifically prove that?
Well, science can't prove that because it's not a scientific question; it's a philosophical question. So scientifically, we couldn't prove it one way or another, right?
So during conception, right, where when you have the egg and sperm, isn't that a life?
I mean, it falls under what we would consider like a living organism, but whether or not it's the type of life that we would grant moral consideration to, that's a philosophical question. Science can't answer that.
Well, is it or is it not a human life?
Well, in my opinion, right now, I kind of fall on the side of no. So.
But are you saying that philosophically or scientifically?
Philosophically. Like what is or isn't considered a life is like that's like a question of philosophy. It's not like a scientific like we can't answer like when should we value human life or what makes human life like morally valuable.
So,
like these are philosophical questions.
Okay. So like when there's like let's say hypothetically there's some type of germ or bacteria found on Mars.
Okay.
They would consider that life, right?
We're
life
considered
on Mars.
like like a living organism, yeah.
Okay.
So if there was I have a specific scenario that kind of relates to abortion. It's gonna sound really weird. So what if there was like an alien invasion attack, right? And they gave you like a choice, right? They said that give me a reason why not should we like enslave you or kill you or whatever, like take control of you, right? What reason would you tell them?
Well, depending on how advanced they are, I might not be able to give any reason at all. Like if these are people that literally saw like in 52 different dimensions or some shit, and our existence literally just like hogged energy away from their civilization or something, I don't know if I would have like a good reason for why they should value our life, other than to just take pity on us. I guess it would depend on how advanced they were or what negative aspect we like had towards their existence.
Okay.
Destiny.
What's up?
If you like had control of the International Criminal Court and let's say everything feasible, what direction would you take it?
I don't know anything about the International Criminal Court, so I wouldn't be able to say like what should change.
What do you think about family abolition?
What do I think about family what?
Abolitionism.
What is like is that the abolishment of like the traditional family, nuclear family or something, or?
Yeah, basically.
I don't know. I mean, family structures have changed in society. I mean, they'll probably continue to change. I mean, whatever has, as long as children's lives aren't being fucked up or whatever, I'm okay with whatever.
Okay. Don't you think that you were kind of a little bit too mean to Joshua for Congress?
No,
Like
I don't think I was
after
mean
he
enough.
said-
No, the guy's like a scam artist. Like he scammed like how many people out of like donating money for him, and the guy like doesn't know anything about politics at all. Like it's insane.
There's also the plagiarism.
Well, again, don't you think that a lot of things he's done could be excusable for his like, I don't know, like mental deficiency or something, or because he did say that he has autism, so.
Autism doesn't mean
I
that
mean-
you're like mentally disabled and can't like talk about your policies or whatever. That's not what autism is. No.
Well, no, but I mean, maybe he could kind of explain why, I don't know, he wasn't like really considering other people's feelings, or like he was like, maybe he didn't intentionally try to scam people or something, right?
I mean, like if that's the case, then maybe he just shouldn't be a politician.
Well, yeah, but I mean, again, like I feel like you were kind of like too hard on him.
No way. He's a politician. Like, it's fair game. Like, what if he was, like, in the fucking White House, like, drafting legislation, and people were like, dude, this legislation fucks us over. And he's like, oh, sorry, well, I'm autistic, so I really wasn't considering how it would impact you. Like, that's not an excuse.
Well, I mean, at the same time, you could argue that somebody like him could never really make it to the White House, right?
Okay, well, then in that case, I'll shadow the fuck out of him on podcasts, and hopefully people don't waste their money donating to him anymore.
Okay.
Destiny, how would you like recommend, or like what resources or things you would direct him?
How would I recommend what resource? Wait, what?
Like, how would you recommend, like,
Wait,
You were his campaign.
did somebody else? Wait, did somebody else hear that question?
No, I cannot hear him either.
I'm sorry. I said if you were his campaign manager, how would you like direct his improvement?
The Joshua guy?
Yes.
I would just have him drop out. I mean, it's pretty clear he doesn't give a fuck about any of the issues. He's just there for like Twitter followers and shit. I don't think he's a serious candidate at all. I would never be the campaign manager to somebody like that.
Have you changed your stance on the N-word?
Nope. I think that there are some private jokes you can say that aren't appropriate publicly, but I mean, I don't care what
Okay,
people
so
say. On private show. Yeah.
what private joke can you say that's funny that involves the N-word in it?
I don't know if I know any jokes that would involve the N-word that would
Well,
be funny.
Well, is there a joke?
Wouldn't that be public if he said that? Like,
Is there any joke that you can think of that you
Not
may,
off the top of my head.
may-
No, I don't really say like N-word jokes.
Okay, well, like if somebody would tell you an N-word joke, right? Or if somebody would tell you a joke that was like racist or was making fun of black people, right?
Yeah, race. That's just a racist joke, then. Yeah, it's probably not good. Depending on like, yeah.
So you would never laugh at one? Like you never laugh at a racist joke?
I mean, it depends on how funny it is. It depends on who's saying it. If they're making me uncomfortable or not. Like Chris Rock or like Dave Chappelle have a lot of like racist jokes. Some of them even aimed at black people. Or like things like the
what? Oh, okay, sorry.
things like the Boondocks have like negative like racist jokes, sometimes even aimed at black people. Like the Boondocks has a whole episode on like how horrible black entertainment television is. Like now, whether you consider it as like aimed at black people or not, you know, like Chris Rock had like one of his most famous skits was like the black people versus N-words like skit. Like, and then Dave Chappelle has had like, you know, funny negative caricatures of all sorts of people on his show as well. Like the trading spouses show or whatever. Like, so I mean, like all of these like large comedians that do like satire humor have had, you know, like comedy skits that are racist. Yeah.
So I mean, I didn't watch the Dave Chappelle skit, but I've watched the Chris Rock skit that you're talking about. And I mean, with that skit, that was not a racist joke at all. He was distinguishing, like bad black people to like the average black people, right?
Okay.
He wasn't making a like. I feel like if a white person made that same type of joke, like.
You think it would be okay? No way, dude. Come
I don't know.
No.
Okay. Well, I mean, I wouldn't say that he would be racist. Like, I wouldn't call him racist.
Yeah, we would. If a white person made a joke, it was like, there's black people and then there's N-words. Like, no way. Like, that would be.
I mean, didn't The Office make that joke? Like, The Office, like, literally quoted that skit.
Yeah, but the joke was that it was so horrible for him to be saying it. Like, the whole joke of that was that white people can't make that joke. That was the whole point.
Okay, but I still don't think that joke is racist, though.
That's great that you don't, but I think a lot of people would be like super uncomfortable with that.
Well, is there a reason why you would think that joke is racist?
Why? What do you? Well, because you're talking about like different groups of types of black people or whatever. Like, I mean, in terms of like why it would be racist, like the idea of referring to some type of black person as like N-words or whatever, as if you're a white person, I think most people would consider that to be racist.
Well, no, he used the word with the A, like he used a soft A. So
I think if a white person used the soft A there, it would still have like a similar impact where people would say that's pretty racist.
Well, okay, you keep switching to like other people will say it. I want to understand, like I want to know if you would say it. Like, what's the argument for you saying that it would be racist?
Wait, okay, hold on. The argument for me saying it, or the argument for me saying it and being racist?
No, like. What is the argument? Because you say that you claim that it's racist, right? And then when I ask you why do you think it's racist, you say, well, other people think it's racist. I want to know, why do you think it's racist? Like why do you
I mean,
think
it depends on like when Chris Rock does it. I don't necessarily think it's racist because I know Chris Rock kind of in terms of like all of his like skits
Also,
and everything. He doesn't seem like a person that's racist. So it seems like okay for him to make that joke. But like if it was just like a random white guy making the joke, or random even some black guy making the joke, I might be like a lot less comfortable with the joke, right? That's why I'm saying it comes down a lot to like who's making the joke or what the context of the joke is.
So you're saying that you may feel uncomfortable, but you wouldn't call it racist then, right?
Well, the problem is that like it's really hard to call any particular thing racist, right? Because any person can say like, oh, well, I'm not racist. I don't mean that in a racist way. Like a lot of people say that, right? So oftentimes like how we determine like is a particular thing racist or not is usually like, well, who's making the joke? Like what jokes or comments have they made in the past? Like is usually how we're determining like if a particular joke is okay for a person to say. But like it can be pretty complicated to figure that out, right?
Well, the reason why I'm like I'm like talking about this point is because you like make this point a whole lot. Because every single time when somebody asks you to give an example.
Well,
of, like,
because people
something
are
that would be
hyper fixated on just the N-word when that's not even like the entirety of like my original stance. Like, I just think that there are some jokes that I would make privately that I wouldn't make publicly because I wouldn't be comfortable with it, because I have like a public platform and I've got like, I think, a responsibility to public discourse to some extent. But like that, but everybody just wants to hear like, how would you use the N-word? Like, personally, I don't really. I can't think of very many funny jokes that have like the N-word as the punchline or something. I'm sure if I thought like really hard, I could go back and look for one, but that's not like, I don't know, people like obsess over that, but I don't know, I just don't personally.
Well, I think the reason why is because some people may feel like kind of uncomfortable, or like they might feel kind of uncomfortable that the public figure that they know kind of uses the N-word in private.
I never even said I used the N-word. Well, I did as a joke towards the girl or whatever. Like, I can't think off the top of my head of any like funny jokes that have the N-word in it. Like, I'm pretty sure most of it would just be like, oh no, actually there was like a really funny joke from South Park that uses the N-word when the guy is trying to like do like a Jeopardy episode or Wheel of Fortune. I don't know how I would like quote that. But like, yeah, I mean, like personally, I don't know many or like even any jokes that I would say that would have the N-word in it. But I know a lot of like racial jokes that like I think are pretty funny that I just don't think are good saying publicly, because I don't know how people would like take that humor. Like, would somebody take it and think that like they can be racist, or that I'm like reaffirming some racist views? So
I would argue in order for you to even consider a joke that's racist to be funny, that you would have to have some like, I don't know, underlying like, I don't know, racial thoughts, right? I mean, it's kind of hard for me to believe that, because like I would never laugh at something that's like racist or like sexist or whatever.
Really,
right?
I have a really hard time believing that.
I mean, like, I don't know, is there any example where you can tell me that like an average person will laugh at, but
well, sure. Okay, sure. Have you heard of the show Atlanta?
No, I've never watched Atlanta.
Oh. Fuck. Well, I don't know. I guess I would. I mean, I'm sure I could find an example of like racialized humor that like you would find funny. I find it hard to believe that there is like no racialized humor that you would find funny whatsoever. That seems pretty unbelievable, I think.
I mean, that says a lot about you.
No, I think you're being disingenuous to win an argument. But I mean, like, you can think what you want. I don't really care.
Okay. I mean, you can't give me an example though.
Of what? I'm trying to, but you haven't seen apparently like any shows. Like, if you haven't seen like South Park or like Atlanta or like anything.
No, I never said I've never seen South Park.
Hello?
What just happened?
I have no idea. Balrog?
That's not me.
Like, have you seen the South Park skit with the Wheel of Fortune episode?
Yeah, I've seen it.
Okay, I think that's like a decently funny skit that like his mind went there when there was another word like clearly available. Like, I think that, you know, like The Office has a lot of humor that's kind of sort of racialized. You know, how like oh my god, the main character guy, the main guy in the manager of The Office. How
Michael.
Okay, hold on. I have to mute Chubby.
It's Chubby. It's
Yeah.
Chubby.
Yeah, we got him.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem. Oh, Michael Scott. Yeah, like how Michael like treats like Stanley sometimes. He says some like really stupid racist shit, and the joke is that like he's like being really dumb and racist. He doesn't realize it. I mean, like like Dave Chappelle and Chris Rock were some of the most popular like comedian-related people in the United States at points in their career. So like the idea that like it says something about me because I find something humor popular, I don't know. I don't buy that.
Okay, I will concede. Okay, I'm gonna concede that point. I was kind of being disingenuous.
Okay.
Sorry. Okay, so but here's another one, right? Okay, so I remember you said that you try very hard to make sure that the person that you say the racist joke to, that they won't like they don't have like any racist intentions, or they're not like themselves a racist or like a bigot overall, right? But I mean, it's very hard. So the problem with that argument is that it's really hard to really know if somebody's like underlying like intentions. Like somebody could be racist, but they just don't come off as racist, or they never like
sure, it's
really
possible.
seem as yeah. So I mean, wouldn't that be a reason why you should not say it?
No, I mean, would like to think I have like a decent handle on like the people that I know personally. It's always possible that somebody could be like a secret racist and I just never see it despite like a long running relationship with them. But I don't, that's not something I would like base my worldview around. Like the idea that I've got secret racist friends.
Well, okay, so what if one of your friends just said, all right, Destiny, I've been lying the whole time. I'm actually racist or whatever. I'm a Nazi, whatever.
Yeah,
What
I'd be
would you say
super
to that?
uncomfortable with them having like any racialized humor around me. I probably wouldn't be friends with that
Well,
person.
no, but like, what if that friend you've been telling him like your racist jokes or whatever, right? And he turns out to be a Nazi. Like, what would you say to that? Like, how would you deal with that situation?
I mean, I would just stop saying racialized jokes around the guy.
Well, I mean, would you say that you before like saying those racist jokes when all at that time he was a Nazi overall, would you say that you were kind of like, I forgot the word,
Reinforcing it a little? It's possible. But like
Yeah,
the
yeah,
flip side
kinda,
of your
yeah.
argument is that I have to get rid of all satire and all irony related to racial or sexist or any type of offensive topic ever because I don't know if somebody is secretly hateful against some group of people in my entire life. I'm not willing to accept that alternative. Like, I'll accept the alternative that it's possible that there's like a secret Nazi friend that I have whose racist views I might be reinforcing. But I would accept that like a million times before like all forms of satire, all edgy humor, all ironic humor, all of it has to go on the off chance that I've got like a secret Nazi friend. Like, I'm okay with that trade-off.
Well, I mean, I feel like you can use forms of satire, but I don't.
Any
Like,
form of
maybe just not
satire
try
that
to-
satirizes like a racial or sexist position is necessarily racist or sexist, right? Like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia does this a lot too. Like it's possible to satirize a position, but certain people will watch it and they won't realize it's satire and they'll just laugh along with it.
Okay.
Have you seen a lot of
So-
like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia?
Well, I no, but I've seen like South Park and Boondocks and the Chris Rock skit and all that. So I mean, I know the general idea of what you're talking about.
Okay. Have you seen like Tropic Thunder from Down Under or whatever?
Sorry, I'm pretty lame.
Oh, no,
so I
that's
didn't
fine.
really
It's okay.
watch-
It's okay.
Yeah.
All right.
If anybody else, okay.
Seems like a generational thing. Like maybe Destiny is 5 to 10 years older.
Maybe it's possible. Yeah.
In my experience, I mean, I'm in my 30s.
Nice. Okay.
Unassuming.
Good one.
I'm gonna change those channel parameters back.
Yeah, there's a guy that I probably wouldn't say racial humor around.
Hey, Destiny, I have a question. What's your opinion on patents?
I think patents are pretty important depending on the industry.
Can you quantify the success of the 4 Asian tigers?
I have no idea what that means.
The 4 Asian tigers are South Korea, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and South Korea, Hong Kong, and one other. But they're basically really 4 post-colonial areas that have massive economic success. And if you could attribute it to a couple things, what do you think it would be?
I don't know enough about their economies or anything to have like a strong opinion on them, so I wouldn't be able to say.
Okay.
Okay. All right, I got one more in me. What do you got? Who's going?
I got a good question.
I got. Sorry.
What is it that got you into and out of the alt-right, Destiny?
I was never an alt-righter. I was born, like, I grew up conservative, but that's just because my parents were, like, very conservative, so I just became a conservative because I grew up under them. But I was never, like, an alt-righter.
Okay, I got one.
Okay,
Are you still
last one.
Catholic though?
No, fuck
Okay,
no.
so-
Very, atheist.
Would you say that somebody who practices astrology is a bigot?
Not, I mean, it depends on what type of, is there, like, bigotry astrology? Maybe it's possible, but
Well, I would argue
That's a
so
weird
because
question.
I mean, well, no, I mean it's gonna sound like a really hot take, but I mean, really, like when you practice astrology, you're judging somebody by their star sign, right? You're judging their characteristics and like how they are or who they are by like basically when they were born, right? So I feel like that fits in definition of bigotry.
Isn't bigotry about intolerance?
I guess it could be. Yeah, I mean, I guess it could be a form of bigotry if you want to be really hot about it.
Yeah.
You could say, like, if somebody was
Yeah.
literally like, I'm not going to talk to you because you're a Virgo, like, I guess that could be a form of bigotry. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. I mean, I
Well,
definitely
you'll-
think so.
You have to
I've
correct
seen,
that
like-
wiki page on you that says you were in the alt-right before.
Wait, on what wiki?
Oh yeah, there's on the Wikipedia it says that you're from the alt-right.
I mean, never been an alt-righter. When did the alt-right even get popular? Wasn't that like 2016?
I'm not sure.
I think that's because you're a
2014.
gamer.
Bonnell has received coverage for live stream. Bonnell, along with Natalie Wynn, were credited by Caleb Kane for his turn away from the alt-right. But that's not me. I was never an alt-righter, I don't think.
Oh, maybe I read that wrong.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I love you guys. Be careful. Stay safe. Right? Rip one.
All right.
Bye.
We love you too.
See you.
Love you too. Bye.
Despite the fact that I am very clearly willing to torch the fuck out of every relationship I have, if I have a friend that says something that I don't agree that